Picture the Sahara at dawn. The silence here is absolute, a vast cathedral of sand stretching beyond the horizon, where dunes rise like frozen waves beneath an endless sky. No sound breaks the stillness, except the whisper of wind sculpting ancient grains into ever-shifting patterns. This is the world's largest hot desert, a realm of scorching days and star-drunk nights, where life clings to the margins and most travelers see only emptiness. Yet beneath your feet lies one of Earth's greatest mysteries. What if this sea of sand was once something entirely different? What if, instead of endless dunes, rivers once carved silver paths through green valleys? What if, where now only scorpions and sparse acacia trees survive, great cities once flourished under different skies? The Sahara spans over 3 million square miles, larger than the entire United States. It dominates North Africa like a sleeping giant, its influence reaching far beyond its borders. The dust from its storms travels across oceans, feeding Amazon rainforests thousands of miles away. Its very existence shapes weather patterns across continents. But this desert, which seems eternal and unchanging, holds secrets that challenge everything we think we know about the past. Modern science tells us that deserts are not permanent features. They expand and contract with the rhythms of climate, sometimes over thousands of years, sometimes much faster. The Sahara itself has transformed multiple times throughout history, from desert to garden and back again, in cycles that dwarf human memory. Standing here, surrounded by this golden immensity, it's almost impossible to imagine anything else. The heat shimmers off the dunes like liquid light. The silence feels primordial, as if sound itself has never existed in this place. Yet recent discoveries have begun to paint a radically different picture of what this land once was. Beneath the sand, satellites have detected the ghostly outlines of ancient riverbeds. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed structures that shouldn't exist in this waterless realm. Rock art hidden in forgotten canyons depicts scenes that seem to belong to another world, entirely or perhaps to this same world, transformed beyond recognition. What if the Sahara's greatest secret isn't what it lacks, but what it remembers? What if this apparent wasteland was once the cradle of a civilization so advanced, so perfectly adapted to its environment, that when the climate changed, it simply vanished beneath the advancing dunes, leaving only whispers and shadows for us to decipher millennia later? The desert keeps its secrets well. Sand is the perfect preserver and the perfect eraser, burying evidence beneath protective layers while simultaneously wearing away all traces of the past. Yet sometimes, when the wind blows just right, it reveals glimpses of what came before. A pottery shard, a carved stone, the outline of an ancient hearth. As we stand here in this magnificent desolation, we must ask ourselves, are we looking at the Sahara as it has always been? Or are we seeing only the latest chapter in a story that began long before human civilization as we know it? What if the very emptiness that defines this place is itself an illusion, hiding beneath its surface the remnants of complexity we have yet to imagine? The journey we're about to undertake will challenge our assumptions about the past, about the permanence of landscapes, and about the resilience of human civilization. We'll discover that the Sahara's silence may not be the absence of history, but its deepest expression, a quiet that holds within it the echoes of voices, the memories of rivers, and perhaps the forgotten dreams of an entire civilization. Meanwhile, thousands of years ago, this same landscape told a completely different story. Millennia before the pyramids rose along the Nile, before the first pharaoh claimed dominion over Egypt, the Sahara pulsed with life. Rivers meandered through grasslands that stretched beyond the horizon. Lakes sparkled under the same sun that now bakes sand into glass. Herds of antelope moved like shadows across savannas, where elephants trumpeted and hippos wallowed in muddy shallows. This was the Green Sahara, a name that sounds like contradiction, but describes a reality supported by overwhelming scientific evidence. Between roughly 12,000 and 4,000 years ago, the world's largest desert was anything but barren. It was a vast ecosystem that may have supported more life than many regions we consider lush today. The transformation began with a subtle shift in Earth's orbit and tilt changes measured in degrees so small they seem insignificant, yet powerful enough to reshape continents. These astronomical cycles, known as Milankovitch cycles, determine how solar radiation reaches different parts of our planet throughout the year. When the cycles aligned just right, they intensified the African monsoon, drawing moisture-laden winds deep into the continental interior. Rain fell where for thousands of years none had fallen. Rivers carved channels through bedrock. Vegetation spread like a green tide across landscapes that had known only the sparse life of desert margins. The Sahara bloomed. But this wasn't simply a slightly less arid version of today's desert. Paleoclimatologist scientists who study ancient climates have reconstructed a world that defies our modern understanding of North Africa. Core samples drilled from lake beds revealed pollen from trees that today grow only in tropical regions hundreds of miles to the south. Fossil evidence shows that giraffes, crocodiles, and even early elephants roamed freely across areas that are now among the most inhospitable places on Earth. The archaeological evidence is equally stunning. Scattered across the Sahara are thousands of sites where ancient peoples lived, worked, and created art. These aren't the temporary camps of desperate survivors clinging to life in a harsh environment. They're the remains of thriving communities that existed for millennia, suggesting a landscape capable of supporting stable populations across vast areas. Water was everywhere. Lake Megachad, which we'll explore more deeply later, covered an area larger than the Caspian Sea. Countless smaller lakes dotted the landscape like jewels. Rivers flowed year-round, their networks visible today only to satellites equipped to see through sand to the ancient channels beneath. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Green Sahara wasn't just its abundance of water and life. It was its potential to support complex human societies. While Europe still shivered in the grip of the last ice age, North Africa may have provided the perfect laboratory for human innovation and cultural development. Think about what this means. While our ancestors in other parts of the world were struggling to survive in frozen landscapes or dense, threatening forests, the people of the Green Sahara lived in a vast, open environment rich with resources and opportunities. They had space to experiment, to develop new technologies, to create art, to observe the stars, and perhaps even to build the foundations of civilization itself. The climate was more than just wet, it was stable. For thousands of years, the monsoons came with reliable regularity. Rivers flowed in predictable patterns. Seasonal migrations of animals followed routes that changed little from generation to generation. This stability would have allowed human societies to plan, to accumulate knowledge, to develop specializations and trade networks. Archaeological evidence suggests that the people of the Green Sahara were among the first in the world to domesticate cattle. They created sophisticated pottery, developed techniques for working stone and metal, and maintained trading relationships across vast distances. Their rock art, which we'll examine in detail, suggests not just artistic sophistication, but complex spiritual and cultural systems. Yet, as we marvel at this lost world, we must also confront its fate. The same astronomical cycles that brought the rains eventually took them away. The monsoons weakened, rivers dwindled, lakes began to shrink, their shores retreating year by year, decade by decade, century by century. The transformation back to desert wasn't instantaneous, it unfolded over thousands of years, though with periods of rapid change that would have been catastrophic for any societies caught in their grip. As the climate dried, the great migrations began. People followed the retreating waters, carrying with them not just their possessions, but their accumulated knowledge, their stories, their technologies, and their dreams. But here lies one of history's great questions. Did they carry something more? As the desert reclaimed the Sahara, As communities were forced to abandon settlements that had existed for millennia, what became of the complex societies that the Green Sahara had nurtured? Did they simply disperse, their achievements scattered to the winds like sand? Or did they leave behind something more substantial: cities, monuments, records of their existence waiting beneath the dunes for rediscovery? As the last rains faded and the sands began their inexorable march across the landscape, the artists among these people left us their final messages. Deep in the mountains of the central Sahara, where ancient granite peaks rise like islands from seas of sand, lies one of humanity's most extraordinary art galleries. Here, on rock faces sheltered from the worst of wind and weather, prehistoric artists left a record of their world that reads like a love letter to paradise lost. The images are breathtaking in their intimacy and scope. Carved and painted with pigments ground from ochre and charcoal, they show a Sahara so alive, so verdant, that they seem like fantasies rather than memories. Yet the careful detail, the obvious familiarity with the subjects, speaks to direct observation. These artists knew intimately the world they depicted. Cattle dominate many of the scenes, rendered with such precision that archaeologists can identify specific breeds. These are not the scrawny, hardy animals that barely survive in marginal desert environments today. They are robust, well-fed creatures with rounded bodies and strong legs, clearly thriving in abundant pastures. Some paintings show herds so vast they stretch across entire rock faces, suggesting populations that could only be supported by rich grasslands. But it's the human figures that capture the imagination most powerfully. We see people engaged in all the activities of a complex society: herding, hunting, dancing, conducting elaborate ceremonies. They wear ornate clothing and jewelry. They carry sophisticated tools and weapons. Their postures and gestures speak of confidence, of people comfortable in their environment and secure in their way of life. Some of the most striking images show scenes that seem almost mythological to modern eyes. Humans swimming alongside hippos, giraffes wandering through what are clearly wetland environments, their legs disappearing into painted marshes. Elephants gathered around water sources, their tusks and trunks rendered with loving attention to detail. One particularly famous panel, found in the Tassili Niger Mountains of Algeria, shows what appears to be a ritualistic scene involving dozens of human figures and cattle. The people are arranged in precise formations, some dancing, others apparently conducting ceremonies. The cattle are decorated with elaborate patterns, suggesting they held significance beyond mere sustenance. They were partners in a complex cultural system, perhaps even objects of worship. The artistic sophistication is remarkable. These weren't simple stick figures scratched hastily into stone. Many of the paintings show advanced techniques, the use of perspective, careful attention to proportion, sophisticated color gradations achieved by mixing pigments. Some sites contain thousands of individual images, created over spans of time that suggest continuous occupation lasting millennia. But perhaps most intriguingly, some of the art seems to tell stories that go beyond simple representation of daily life. There are scenes that appear to show conflicts between groups, migrations of people and animals, and what might be historical events of great significance. Some researchers have suggested that certain paintings might even be attempting to preserve knowledge star maps, seasonal calendars, or records of important cultural practices. The distribution of these art sites across the Sahara is equally fascinating. They're not concentrated in just a few areas, but scattered across thousands of miles, from the Atlantic coast of Morocco to the mountains of Chad and Sudan. This suggests not isolated groups of artists, but a widespread cultural phenomenon, perhaps evidence of communication and shared artistic traditions across vast distances. What makes these images even more poignant is their relationship to time. Radiocarbon dating and stylistic analysis suggest that the art spans thousands of years, chronicling the gradual transformation of the Sahara from garden to desert. The earliest images show the full abundance of the green Sahara lush scenes teeming with life. Later works begin to show changes. Smaller herds, different animal species, scenes that suggest increasing concern with water sources. The most recent pre-desert images have a haunting quality. They often focus on water rivers, lakes, wells. Animals and humans are frequently shown clustered around these precious sources. Some of the final cattle paintings show the animals looking thin, their ribs visible, their poses suggesting stress. It's as if the artists were documenting not just their world, but its decline, leaving a visual record of paradise lost. Yet among these later images are some of the most sophisticated and beautiful. As if knowing their world was ending, the artists poured their hearts into preserving its memory. Some of the most detailed cattle paintings date from the very end of the wet period, suggesting that as their way of life became increasingly precarious, these people found it more important than ever to record what they were losing. But there are anomalies in this art that raise troubling questions for conventional archaeology. Some images seem to show technologies or practices that don't fit neat timelines of human development. There are depictions of what appear to be wheeled vehicles in regions where the wheel supposedly wasn't invented for thousands of years. There are human figures wearing elaborate headdresses and clothing that suggest levels of organization and specialization typically associated with urban civilizations. Most mysteriously, there are scenes that seem to show large gatherings of people, hundreds or even thousands of figures, arranged in complex patterns around what appear to be architectural structures. These aren't simple camps or temporary settlements. They suggest permanent installations, possibly even cities, though no trace of such large settlements has been found in the archaeological record. As we study these ancient masterpieces, we must ask ourselves, were these artists simply documenting the daily life of pastoral peoples? Or were they preserving memories of something greater? Did they paint from life, or from stories passed down about an even more distant past? And if their art does record the existence of complex societies in the Green Sahara, what happened to the physical remains of those civilizations? Meanwhile, far to the east, an even more dramatic testament to the Sahara's watery past lay hidden beneath the waves of an inland sea that dwarfed any lake existing today. In the heart of what is now the Republic of Chad, where the desert meets the sparse grasslands of the Sahel, lies Lake Chad, a shadow of water in an ocean of heat. Today, this lake barely covers a few thousand square miles, and even that fluctuates dramatically with the seasons. Its shores retreat and advance like breathing, exposing vast mudflats that crack under the African sun. It seems almost tragic, this remnant of water struggling to exist in such an unforgiving landscape. But 10,000 years ago, in this same location, stretched one of the largest freshwater lakes in Earth's history. Lake Megachad, as scientists now call it, covered an area of nearly 140,000 square miles larger than the Black Sea, larger than the Great Lakes combined. It was a freshwater ocean in the middle of Africa, fed by rivers that flowed year-round from highlands hundreds of miles away. Its shores supported forests of trees that today grow only in the wettest parts of tropical Africa. Its waters teemed with fish, crocodiles, and hippos. Along its beaches, countless generations of humans built their lives around this seemingly eternal source of abundance. The evidence for this vanished sea lies scattered across what is now some of the most arid land on Earth. Satellite images reveal ancient shorelines etched into the landscape like bathtub rings on a continental scale. These beach ridges stretch for hundreds of miles, marking the high water marks of a lake that once dominated the geography of Central Africa. Scattered across these ancient beaches are shells, not just the tiny freshwater mollusks you might expect, but massive specimens of species that required large, stable bodies of water to thrive. Some of these shells have been dated to 8,000 years old, yet they lie on ground where today no water flows for months at a time. They are messengers from a drowned world, testifying to depths and abundance that strain modern imagination. But it's the human evidence around Lake Megachad that truly captures the imagination. Archaeological sites along the ancient shorelines reveal sophisticated fishing cultures that persisted for millennia. These weren't nomadic people struggling to survive in a marginal environment. They were settled communities with specialized technologies for harvesting the lake's abundance. Excavations have uncovered elaborate fishhooks carved from bone, harpoon points designed for large aquatic prey, and pottery specially designed for storing and preparing fish. Some sites contain massive shell middens, garbage dumps of discarded mollusk shells that stretch for acres and reach depths of several feet. The sheer volume of these deposits suggests not just successful fishing, but surplus production, the kind of abundance that allows populations to grow and cultures to develop complexity. The pottery found at these sites is particularly remarkable. It's not the crude, utilitarian ceramics you might expect from prehistoric fishing villages. Many pieces show sophisticated decorative techniques, complex geometric patterns, and evidence of specialized production. Some vessels are large enough to store hundreds of gallons of water or food, suggesting either large households or communal storage systems. Even more intriguingly, some of the ceramic traditions found around Lake Megachad show connections to pottery styles found thousands of miles away, along the Nile and even in the eastern Sahara. This suggests trade networks or cultural exchanges spanning vast distances, the kind of long-range connections typically associated with complex civilizations. But Lake Megachad was more than just a source of fish and water. It was a highway. In a landscape where travel overland was difficult and dangerous, the lake provided a vast, navigable water body connecting regions that today are separated by hundreds of miles of desert. Imagine the possibilities. Fleets of boats carrying goods, ideas, and people across waters that reflected endless African skies. Evidence for this aquatic highway comes from the distribution of artifacts around the ancient lake. Tools made from stone that occurs only in specific geological formations hundreds of miles apart. Pottery styles that seem to have spread rapidly around the entire shoreline. As the climate began to change and the monsoons weakened, Lake Megachad began its slow retreat. But this wasn't a gradual, uniform shrinkage. Climate records suggest that the lake's decline was punctuated by periods of rapid change, decades when water levels dropped dramatically, stranding communities that had relied on lakeside resources for generations. Picture the human drama of this transformation. Fishing villages that had thrived for centuries suddenly found themselves miles from receding waters. Trade routes that had connected distant regions became impassable as the lake shrank into disconnected pools. Entire ways of life, perfected over millennia, became obsolete within the span of a few generations. Yet somehow, many of these communities survived the transition. Archaeological evidence suggests that as the lake retreated, populations concentrated around the remaining water sources. Technologies adapted to new realities. Cultural practices evolved to cope with increasing scarcity. The sophisticated pottery traditions continued, though the vessels became smaller, more portable. Some groups followed the retreating waters, gradually migrating eastward toward the Nile as Lake Megachad dwindled. Others headed south, carrying their knowledge and technologies into regions that remained habitable. A few may have stayed, adapting to increasingly desert conditions, their descendants eventually becoming the nomadic peoples who still eke out existences in these harsh lands today. But what happened to the permanent installations around the lake, the monuments, the large settlements, the infrastructure of a civilization built around this vanished sea? Some may have been dismantled by their builders as communities prepared to migrate. Others might have been buried by the advancing desert. But is it possible that some remain, hidden beneath the sands, waiting for archaeologists with the tools and determination to uncover them? The story of Lake Megachad raises profound questions about impermanence and adaptation, about the rise and fall of civilizations tied to environmental change. It reminds us that even the most seemingly permanent features of our world Great Lakes, mighty rivers, vast forests, are temporary when viewed across the deep time scales of climate change. As the lake continued its inexorable shrinkage, other mysteries were beginning to emerge from the changing landscape structures that would challenge our understanding of prehistoric human achievement. The radar pierces through 10 feet of sand as if it were water, sending back ghostly images that appear on computer screens in air-conditioned trailers. Dr. Sarah Chon adjusts the equipment settings and watches as another impossible structure takes shape on her monitor. The geometric regularity is unmistakable. These are not natural formations. But according to everything archaeology knows about this region, nothing this complex should exist here. This scene, played out repeatedly across the Sahara in recent decades, represents one of the most tantalizing frontiers in archaeological research. As satellite technology and ground-penetrating radar become more sophisticated and accessible, researchers are discovering that the seemingly empty desert may be anything but vacant. Beneath the dunes lie the shadows of structures that do and fit conventional timelines of human development in North Africa. The technology revealing these mysteries would have seemed like magic to earlier generations of archaeologists. Synthetic aperture radar, flown aboard satellites hundreds of miles above Earth, can detect variations in surface texture and subsurface density that are invisible to the human eye. Ground-penetrating radar can map buried structures with remarkable precision, creating three-dimensional images of walls, rooms, and entire building complexes hidden beneath meters of accumulated sand. What these technologies are revealing challenges fundamental assumptions about the Sahara's past. In areas that have been considered archaeologically barren, researchers are finding evidence of extensive human occupation. Not the scattered camps and temporary settlements you might expect from nomadic peoples, but organized, geometric structures that suggest permanent communities and possibly even urban centers. One of the most intriguing discoveries comes from the Western Sahara, where satellite analysis has revealed what appears to be a vast network of rectangular enclosures arranged in grid patterns. These structures, visible only as faint variations in surface texture, stretch across an area of several square miles. Their regularity and organization suggest careful planning and sustained construction, effort hallmarks of complex societies. Ground-truthing missions expeditions to physically excavate and verify what the remote sensing equipment suggests have yielded tantalizing but frustrating results. In some cases, archaeologists have found exactly what the technology predicted: stone foundations, ceramic fragments, and evidence of organized human activity. But the dating of these finds often creates more questions than answers. Some of the structures appear to be far older than the established chronology of complex societies in North Africa. Radiocarbon dates from organic materials found within these buried ruins sometimes stretch back 8 or even 10,000 years periods when mainstream archaeology suggests that the region was populated only by small groups of hunter-gatherers and early pastoralists. The mainstream archaeological community approaches these discoveries with appropriate caution. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and the interpretation of remote sensing data is notoriously tricky. Natural geological processes can create patterns that mimic human construction. Sand dunes and wind erosion can produce geometric shapes that fool even sophisticated instruments. The history of archaeology is littered with discoveries that turned out to be wishful thinking or misinterpretation of natural phenomena. Yet some of the evidence is becoming difficult to dismiss. Multispectral satellite analysis has revealed what appear to be road networks connecting scattered sites across hundreds of miles of desert. These linear features are too straight, too purposeful in their orientation to be natural river channels or geological formations. They suggest organized transportation systems linking distant communities' infrastructure that implies populations large enough and stable enough to justify such massive construction projects. Even more intriguingly, some of these potential road networks seem to converge on specific locations where ground-penetrating radar has detected the largest and most complex buried structures. If these interpretations are correct, they suggest not just scattered settlements, but hierarchical systems with central places that coordinated activities across vast regions. The implications are staggering. If even a fraction of these buried structures prove to represent genuine prehistoric settlements, it would mean that the Sahara once supported populations and levels of organization far beyond what current models suggest. It might mean that while Europe was still emerging from the Ice Age, North Africa was already home to sophisticated urban civilizations. But proving these theories requires more than remote sensing. It requires extensive excavation, careful stratigraphic analysis, and rigorous dating techniques. Unfortunately, such work in the Sahara faces enormous practical challenges. The locations are often remote, accessible only by expedition across dangerous desert terrain. Political instability in many regions makes research difficult or impossible, and the sheer scale of the potential discoveries would require resources that dwarf most archaeological budgets. Some of the most promising sites remain frustratingly out of reach. High-resolution satellite imagery has revealed what appears to be a massive complex of structures buried beneath dunes in a region currently experiencing civil conflict. The geometric precision and apparent scale of this site have excited researchers, but ground verification remains impossible under current conditions. Private researchers and amateur archaeologists, working with increasingly affordable satellite imagery and computer analysis tools, have added their own discoveries to the mix. While their work lacks the rigor of professional archaeology, some of their findings have proven genuinely intriguing. Crowdsourced analysis of satellite data has identified hundreds of potential archaeological sites across North Africa, many in regions that have never been systematically surveyed. The debate over these discoveries reflects deeper questions about the nature of prehistoric African civilizations. For too long, archaeological research has been dominated by assumptions about technological and social development that were based primarily on European models. The possibility that sophisticated societies might have emerged independently in Africa, perhaps even earlier than in traditionally studied regions, challenges Eurocentric views of human development. Yet skepticism serves an important purpose. The history of Saharan archaeology includes numerous false starts and abandoned theories. The desert's harsh conditions and vast scales can play tricks on both instruments and imagination. What appears to be evidence of ancient cities might prove to be nothing more than unusual geological formations, or the remnants of much more recent and mundane human activities. As the technology continues to improve and more resources become available for ground verification, we may finally answer some of these questions. Future missions equipped with more sophisticated radar systems, automated excavation equipment, and advanced dating techniques may unlock the secrets that lie beneath the sand. Meanwhile, in other parts of the ancient Sahara, structures that are definitely real and undeniably mysterious continue to puzzle researchers. Monuments that seem to reach toward the stars themselves. In the remote reaches of southern Egypt, where the desert stretches endlessly toward Sudan, stands a monument that predates Stonehenge by 1,000 years. Nabta Playa appears at first glance to be nothing more than a scattered collection of stones, weathered megaliths that seem almost random in their placement across the barren landscape. Yet these ancient sentinels hold secrets that have revolutionized our understanding of prehistoric African astronomy and possibly the very origins of complex society. The site was discovered almost by accident in the 1970s by archaeologists working in the region. What initially appeared to be a simple prehistoric camp revealed itself over decades of careful excavation to be something far more sophisticated, an astronomical observatory of remarkable precision. created by people who are supposed to lack the mathematical and organizational capabilities for such achievements. Nabta Playa consists of several components that work together as an integrated system. Stone circles mark significant positions, their alignments corresponding to celestial events with startling accuracy. Megalithic structures, some weighing several tons, were carefully positioned to frame specific points on the horizon, where important stars would rise at crucial times of the year. Underground chambers, carved from bedrock and covered with massive stone slabs, may have served as both tombs and symbolic representations of cosmic forces. But it's the calendar circle that truly astounds researchers. This ring of stones, about 12 feet in diameter, functions as a sophisticated device for tracking the summer solstice. On the longest day of the year, the sun rises precisely between two specific megaliths, casting shadows that align with other stones in the circle. The precision required to achieve this alignment suggests not only advanced astronomical knowledge, but also the organizational capability to plan and execute complex construction projects. Carbon dating places the earliest phases of Nabta Playa at around 6000 BCE, making it not just older than Stonehenge, but contemporary with some of the earliest urban centers in Mesopotamia. Yet this monument stands not in a river valley blessed with agriculture and trade routes, but in what was already becoming desert, a harsh environment that mainstream archaeology suggests could support only small, mobile groups of hunter-gatherers. The implications are profound. Creating Nabta Playa would have required sustained effort by groups large enough and stable enough to undertake multi-generational projects. The astronomical knowledge embedded in its design suggests sophisticated observation and mathematical calculation extending over decades or centuries. Most significantly, the site represents a level of cultural achievement that challenges conventional models of how and where complex societies first emerged. Recent analysis has revealed even more startling possibilities. Computer modeling of the monument's alignments suggests that its builders were tracking not just the sun and obvious stellar movements, but the precession of the equinoxes, a subtle astronomical cycle that takes nearly 26,000 years to complete. If confirmed, this would mean that the people of Nabta Playa possessed mathematical and observational capabilities that weren't achieved in Europe for thousands of years. But Nabta Playa is not unique. Across the Sahara, archaeologists have identified dozens of megalithic sites that show varying degrees of astronomical alignment and architectural sophistication. Some are simple stone circles marking seasonal observations. Others are complex arrangements of megaliths that seem to encode sophisticated mathematical relationships. A few are massive constructions that rival better-known monuments in Europe and Asia. In the Air Mountains of Niger, stone circles and aligned megaliths create what researchers have dubbed Africa's Stonehenge. The monuments here show clear astronomical alignments and evidence of careful planning. Yet they exist in a region that is now almost uninhabitably arid. In Chad, mysterious stone arrangements appear to track stellar movements with remarkable precision. In Morocco, megalithic sites show architectural techniques and artistic sensibilities that suggest connections to sophisticated cultural traditions. The distribution of these sites across the Sahara raises fascinating questions about ancient communication and cultural exchange. The astronomical knowledge required to create such monuments suggests either independent invention in multiple locations, implying widespread scientific sophistication, or networks of knowledge sharing that connected distant communities across vast expanses of desert. Some researchers have suggested that these megalithic sites represent more than just astronomical observatories. The effort required to create them, the sophisticated knowledge they encode, and their distribution across the landscape suggests they might have been nodes in networks of communication and coordination, perhaps even capitals of prehistoric kingdoms that used astronomical knowledge as both practical tool and symbol of power. The people who built these monuments left few other traces. They created no writing systems that have survived, built no cities that archaeologists have yet discovered, left no obvious successors to carry on their traditions. Yet their megalithic monuments endure, silent testimony to levels of achievement that don't fit comfortable categories of prehistoric development. Archaeological evidence from around these sites provides tantalizing glimpses of their builders. Pottery fragments show sophisticated decorative techniques and evidence of specialized production. Tool assemblages suggest complex technologies for working stone and possibly metals. Burial practices indicate social stratification and possibly ritual traditions that extended across multiple sites. Most mysteriously, some of the megalithic sites show evidence of sudden abandonment around 4000 BCE, roughly the time when the Sahara's climate was completing its transition from green savanna to desert. The timing suggests that these sophisticated societies were casualties of the Great Drying, their achievements scattered to the winds as their carefully cultivated environments became uninhabitable. Yet other evidence hints at continuity. Some of the astronomical knowledge encoded in Saharan megaliths shows up later in Egyptian temples and monuments. The precision of astronomical observation, the mathematical relationships embedded in architectural design, and even specific star alignments seem to have been preserved and transmitted across the millennia. Did refugees from the drying Sahara carry this knowledge to the Nile Valley, where it became part of the foundation of pharaonic civilization? The question becomes even more intriguing when we consider the broader pattern of megalithic construction across ancient Africa. From the stone circles of Senegambia to the obelisks of Ethiopia, from the rock-cut churches of Lalibela to the great Zimbabwe complex, the continent has a rich tradition of monumental stone, construction that mainstream archaeology has often overlooked or minimized. Standing among the weathered stones of Nabta Playa, surrounded by the infinite silence of the desert, it's impossible not to wonder what other achievements of these ancient astronomers remain buried beneath the sand. If they possessed the knowledge and organization to create such sophisticated observatories, what other monuments might they have built? What other knowledge might they have encoded in stone, waiting for modern science to rediscover and decode? As the climate continued its relentless shift toward aridity, the builders of these stone circles faced choices that would echo through history. The rains failed again that year, as they had for the past 3 summers. The wells that had sustained the community for generations began to run dry. Herds that had grazed contentedly on grasslands now wandered in search of fodder that grew scarcer with each passing season. Elders who had never known want in this green land began to speak of journeys to distant places where rivers still flowed and grass still grew. This scene, replayed countless times across the Sahara between 6000 and 4000 BCE, represents one of the great human migrations in history, a movement of peoples that may have shaped the development of civilization itself. As the climate shifted and the desert advanced, the populations that had flourished in the Green Sahara faced stark choices: adapt to increasingly harsh conditions, perish, or move to more hospitable lands. The archaeological evidence for this great migration is written across North Africa in a language of abandoned settlements, shifting pottery traditions, and the sudden appearance of new technologies in regions where they had never been seen before. It's a story told in the genetic heritage of modern populations, in linguistic relationships that span continents, and in cultural practices that echo across millennia. The most obvious destination for Saharan refugees was the Nile Valley. Here, a reliable river system promised permanent water even as the surrounding landscape dried. The timing of cultural developments along the Nile correlates remarkably with the periods of greatest climate stress in the Sahara. As the desert advanced, the Nile Valley saw sudden population increases, technological innovations, and the emergence of increasingly complex societies. Many of the innovations that would later characterize ancient Egyptian civilization first appeared during these critical centuries. Advanced pottery techniques, sophisticated stoneworking, early metalworking, and complex astronomical knowledge all seem to have developed or been refined during the period when Saharan populations were most under pressure. The correlation is too strong to be coincidental. Consider the evidence from Hieron Palace, one of the earliest urban centers in Egypt. Archaeological excavations here have revealed a sudden influx of cultural innovations around 4000 BCE, precisely the time when the Sahara was completing its transformation to desert. New artistic styles appear that show clear connections to Saharan rock art traditions. Pottery designs echo decorative patterns found in sites across the drying desert. Most significantly, evidence of cattle worship, a practice deeply embedded in Saharan pastoral cultures, becomes prominent in Egyptian religious iconography. The connection becomes even clearer when we examine the astronomical knowledge embedded in early Egyptian monuments. The precision of stellar alignments and structures, like the pyramids of Giza, suggests mathematical and observational capabilities that developed over centuries or millennia. Yet the earliest Egyptian texts provide no clear source for this knowledge. The megalithic observatories of the Sahara, with their sophisticated tracking of celestial movements, provide a plausible origin for these capabilities. Genetic studies of modern populations support the archaeological evidence for large-scale migration from the Sahara to the Nile Valley. DNA analysis of mummies from ancient Egypt shows clear connections to populations from across North Africa, including regions that are now deep desert. Modern Egyptians carry genetic signatures that link them not just to Middle Eastern populations, but to groups from across the Sahara and Sub-Saharan Africa. But the Nile Valley was not the only destination for Saharan migrants. Evidence suggests that as the desert advanced, populations spread in multiple directions, carrying their knowledge and technologies to distant lands. Some groups moved south, following retreating lakes and rivers into what is now the Sahel and beyond. Others traveled west, toward the Atlantic coast of Africa. Still others may have moved north, crossing the Mediterranean to influence developments in Europe and the Middle East. The migration south may have been particularly significant for the development of African civilizations. Archaeological evidence suggests that sophisticated ironworking technologies, complex pottery traditions, and advanced agricultural techniques spread rapidly across sub-Saharan Africa during the period when the Sahara was drying. The timing and distribution patterns suggest that Saharan refugees may have carried these innovations with them as they sought new homes. Some of the most intriguing evidence comes from the Lake Chad region, where the drying of Lake Chad would have displaced large populations with sophisticated fishing and trading technologies. Archaeological sites in Nigeria, Cameroon, and the Central African Republic show sudden appearances of new cultural elements around 4000 BCE that seem to have connections to Saharan traditions. These include advanced ceramics, sophisticated metalworking, and evidence of long-distance trade networks. The linguistic evidence is equally compelling. Many African language families show relationships that suggest ancient connections across regions now separated by desert. The distribution of certain linguistic features specialized vocabularies for cattle keeping, astronomical observation, and metalworking follows patterns that could reflect the movement of Saharan populations as the climate changed. Perhaps most intriguingly, some researchers have suggested that Saharan migrants may have carried their knowledge even further afield. The timing of certain cultural developments in the Mediterranean region, the sudden appearance of sophisticated astronomical knowledge in ancient European monuments, and even possible connections to early American civilizations have been proposed as evidence of far-ranging Saharan influence. The westward migration routes are particularly fascinating to consider. Along the Atlantic coast of Africa, archaeological sites show evidence of sophisticated maritime technologies that appear suddenly in the archaeological record around the time of Saharan desiccation. Could refugees from the drying interior have developed ocean-going capabilities, carrying their knowledge to distant shores? But these migrations were not simply desperate flights from environmental disaster. The people leaving the Sahara carried with them accumulated knowledge and technologies developed over millennia of successful adaptation to challenging environments. They brought sophisticated understanding of astronomy, advanced techniques for working stone and metal, complex social systems for managing resources and resolving conflicts, and rich traditions of art and spiritual practice. The integration of these refugee populations with existing communities in their new homes would have been a complex process involving both conflict and cooperation, cultural exchange and resistance. Archaeological evidence suggests that in some regions, the new arrivals dominated existing populations, imposing their technologies and cultural practices. In others, there seems to have been more gradual integration, with Saharan innovations slowly spreading through existing communities. The scale of this migration may have been enormous. If the Green Sahara supported populations even remotely comparable to what its resources could have sustained, the number of people forced to relocate as the climate changed could have numbered in the millions. Such a massive movement of peoples, carrying sophisticated technologies and cultural knowledge, would have had profound impacts on human development across multiple continents. As these ancient migrants carried their memories and knowledge to new lands, they left behind in their former homeland traces of their achievements that would remain hidden for millennia. The French explorer Charles Toutaine was dying of thirst when he stumbled across the impossible. Lost in the deep Sahara in 1938, his water long exhausted and his compass spinning uselessly in the magnetic chaos of iron-rich sands, he collapsed against what he thought was a boulder. When he looked down, expecting to see granite or sandstone, he found himself staring at the perfect skeleton of a fish. Not just any fish, but a massive specimen nearly 6 feet long, its bones turned to stone, but so perfectly preserved that every scale was visible in exquisite detail. Around it, scattered like offerings in some ancient cathedral, lay hundreds of other fish fossils, some tiny as minnows, others large as sharks. Here, in one of the most waterless places on Earth, was evidence of an aquatic world so abundant it defied imagination. Toutaine survived his ordeal, rescued by a Tuareg caravan that found him delirious beside his fossil discovery. But his account of fish skeletons in the deep desert was dismissed by European scientists as the hallucinations of a sun-struck explorer. It would be decades before paleontologists confirmed what Toutaine had found: one of the richest fossil fish deposits in the world, hidden in the heart of the Sahara. The site, now known as Wadi al-Haytham, or the Valley of Whales, contains fossils that tell an extraordinary story of environmental transformation. The fish skeletons Toutaine discovered represent species that lived in vast freshwater systems, lakes, rivers, and wetlands that covered much of North Africa during earlier geological periods. Some of the fossils are so well preserved that soft tissue impressions are still visible, showing not just bones, but scales, fins, and even stomach contents. But it's the sheer abundance of these fossils that truly staggers the imagination. In some areas, the concentration of fish skeletons is so dense that the ground is literally paved with ancient bones. Excavations have revealed mass mortality events, moments when entire populations of fish died simultaneously, possibly due to sudden changes in water chemistry or temperature. Their bodies were then rapidly buried in fine sediment, preserving them in remarkable detail for millions of years. The species represented in these fossil beds paint a picture of aquatic ecosystems more diverse and abundant than anything existing in Africa today. There are fossils of giant catfish, their skulls indicating fish that would have weighed hundreds of pounds. Ancient relatives of Nile perch suggest populations so vast they could have supported large predator species. Primitive lonefish fossils indicate seasonal environments where breathing air was an advantage during dry periods. Most remarkably, some of the fossil sites contain evidence of human interaction with these ancient aquatic environments. Stone tools have been found in direct association with fish fossils, suggesting that ancient peoples harvested these resources. But the dating of these associations presents puzzles that conventional archaeology struggles to explain. Some of the human artifacts appear to be associated with fossil beds that are supposed to predate human presence in the region by hundreds of thousands of years. The discovery of fossilized fish in the Sahara raises profound questions about the stability of environmental systems and the speed with which dramatic changes can occur. The fish represented in these fossil beds required permanent, large bodies of water to survive. Yet they're found in regions where no surface water has existed for thousands of years. The transformation from aquatic abundance to desert aridity happened not once, but multiple times throughout geological history. Even more intriguingly, some of the fish fossil sites show evidence of multiple periods of abundance separated by intervals of aridity. Stratigraphic analysis reveals alternating layers of fish-rich sediments and desert deposits, suggesting that the Sahara has cycled repeatedly between wet and dry conditions over geological timescales. This pattern of cyclical change adds complexity to our understanding of the region's history and raises questions about what other evidence of past abundance might be hidden beneath the sand. The preservation quality of these fossils is so extraordinary that they provide insights into ancient behaviors and ecological relationships. Some fish skeletons show evidence of predation bite marks from ancient crocodiles or other large predators. Others preserve last meals in their stomachs, providing detailed pictures of ancient food webs. A few remarkable specimens even preserve evidence of care for young, showing ancient fish species with smaller skeletons clustered around larger ones in apparent family groups. Modern technology has revealed even more secrets hidden in these fossil beds. CT scanning of fish fossils has uncovered internal structures, swim bladders, nerve pathways, even brain tissue replaced by minerals that provide unprecedented detail about the physiology of ancient aquatic life. Some specimens are so perfectly preserved that researchers can determine what the fish had eaten just hours before death, painting intimate portraits of daily life in vanished ecosystems. The distribution of fish fossil sites across the Sahara provides a map of ancient waterways that once crisscrossed the region. By plotting the locations of different fossil beds and analyzing the species they contain, paleontologists have reconstructed networks of rivers and lakes that connected distant parts of Africa. These ancient waterways would have served as highways for both aquatic life and human populations, linking regions that today are separated by hundreds of miles of desert. But perhaps most fascinating are the fossil sites that seem to preserve moments of environmental transition periods when abundant aquatic ecosystems were giving way to drier conditions. These sites contain mixed assemblages of fish adapted to different environmental conditions, suggesting ecosystems under stress as water levels dropped and habitats fragmented. The final layers often contain only the most drought-resistant species, recording the last gasps of aquatic life as the desert advanced. The story told by these fossilized fish resonates with the broader mystery of Saharan civilizations. If fish populations so abundant they left fossil beds spanning miles could vanish completely, what other evidence of past abundance might be hidden beneath the sand? If entire aquatic ecosystems could disappear so thoroughly that their existence was forgotten until accidental rediscovery, what human achievements might have suffered similar fates? As researchers continue to uncover new fossil sites across the Sahara, each discovery adds another piece to the puzzle of the desert's hidden past. Some sites are so remote and dangerous to reach that they remain largely unexplored, their secrets waiting for future expeditions. Others have been damaged by fossil hunters and collectors, their scientific value compromised by commercial exploitation. The fossilized fish of the Sahara serve as both monuments to abundance lost and warnings about the impermanence of even the most seemingly stable ecosystems. They remind us that landscapes we consider permanent and unchanging are merely temporary arrangements, subject to forces and cycles that operate on timescales that dwarf human experience. Meanwhile, scattered across this same landscape, other mysteries waited in the form of ancient scripts, carved by peoples whose identities remain as enigmatic as the messages they left behind. Carved into the red sandstone of a hidden canyon deep in the Moroccan Sahara, the symbols seem to dance before your eyes in the flickering light of morning sun. They are not random scratches made by wind or weather. These are deliberate marks, carefully incised by human hands thousands of years ago. Each character follows precise rules of form and spacing. They are arranged in lines and columns that suggest structured communication. This is writing, but writing in a script that no living person can read. The symbols belong to Tifana, the ancient script of the Berber peoples of North Africa. But these particular inscriptions are far older than any Tifinagh texts found elsewhere, carved at a time when the Sahara was still green, and the peoples who made them lived in a world that would soon vanish forever. The messages they left behind may be the last voices of civilizations that predated all recorded history in North Africa. Tifinagh scripts have been found scattered across thousands of miles of desert, from Morocco to Chad, from Algeria to Sudan. The distribution alone suggests something remarkable, either a single, widespread culture that maintained linguistic unity across vast distances, or networks of communication and cultural exchange that connected distant communities throughout the ancient Sahara. But it's the age of some of these inscriptions that truly challenges conventional understanding. While most known Tifinagh texts date from the historical period, when they were used by documented Berber kingdoms, some inscriptions found in deep Saharan sites appear to be far more ancient. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials found in association with certain carved texts suggests ages reaching back 6,000 or even 8,000 years periods when mainstream. Archaeology suggests that North Africa was populated by peoples who had not yet developed writing systems. The decipherment of these ancient Tifinagh texts presents extraordinary challenges. Modern Tifinagh, still used by some Berber communities today, provides clues to the meanings of individual symbols. But languages change over time, and the ancient Saharan dialects represented by these early inscriptions may have been as different from modern Berber languages as Latin is from modern Italian. Moreover, the context in which these ancient texts were created, the purposes they served, the cultural practices they recorded, remain largely mysterious. Some researchers believe that certain Tifinagh inscriptions may preserve knowledge systems developed by sophisticated Saharan societies. The careful placement of many text sites, often in locations with clear astronomical alignments or significant geographical features, suggests that the inscriptions may have served functions beyond simple communication. They might have been markers for navigation, records of seasonal observations, or even repositories of technical knowledge. One particularly intriguing set of inscriptions was discovered in the Ahagar Mountains of Algeria, carved into rock faces that also bear sophisticated astronomical alignments. The texts appear to be arranged in patterns that correspond to celestial movements, suggesting that they might preserve ancient knowledge of astronomy and timekeeping. If confirmed, this would represent one of the earliest known examples of scientific knowledge being preserved in written form. The artistic sophistication of many ancient Tifinagh inscriptions rivals that of much later writing systems. Some texts incorporate decorative elements and pictographic components that blur the lines between writing and art. Others show evidence of careful planning and layout, with symbols arranged in complex geometric patterns that suggest aesthetic as well as communicative purposes. Perhaps most mysteriously, some Tifinagh inscriptions appear to record information that doesn't fit conventional understanding of prehistoric North African societies. Certain texts seem to describe large-scale construction projects, complex social hierarchies, and technical processes that imply levels of organization and knowledge typically associated with urban civilizations. While these interpretations remain highly speculative, ancient languages are notoriously difficult to translate accurately. They raise tantalizing possibilities about the sophistication of Saharan societies. The distribution patterns of Tifinagh inscriptions also tell fascinating stories about ancient trade and communication networks. Certain symbol combinations and stylistic features appear repeatedly across vast distances, suggesting either rapid communication between distant sites or the movement of scribes and knowledge keepers across the desert. Some inscriptions appear to mark trade routes or resource locations, serving as ancient guidebooks for travelers crossing the Sahara. Even more intriguingly, some researchers have identified possible connections between ancient Tifinagh scripts and writing systems found in other parts of Africa and even beyond. Certain symbol forms show resemblances to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, suggesting possible cultural connections between the Sahara and the Nile Valley. Others bear similarities to scripts found in the Canary Islands and even Iberia, raising questions about the extent of ancient North African cultural influence. The preservation of these ancient texts has been remarkably variable. In protected locations, such as deep caves or sheltered rock faces, some inscriptions remain crisp and clear after thousands of years. Others have been damaged by erosion, human interference, or natural disasters. Some sites show evidence of multiple periods of inscription, with later texts carved over earlier ones, creating palimpsests of ancient communication. Modern technology is revolutionizing the study of these ancient scripts. High-resolution photography and digital enhancement techniques can reveal details invisible to the naked eye. Three-dimensional scanning allows researchers to study the techniques used to create the inscriptions and to detect faded or damaged text. Computer analysis of symbol patterns and distributions is helping to identify linguistic relationships and communication networks. But perhaps the greatest mystery surrounding ancient Tifinagh scripts is their sudden disappearance from much of the Sahara. While Berber communities continued to use evolved forms of Tifinagh in marginal areas, the tradition of monumental inscription that characterized the ancient Sahara seems to have ended abruptly around the time of the Great Drawing. Did the knowledge of writing disappear with the civilizations that created it? Or did it survive in forms we have yet to recognize? Some tantalizing clues suggest continuity. Certain symbol forms found in ancient Saharan inscriptions appear in much later contexts in medieval Arab texts describing strange writings found in the desert, in the decorative traditions of North African crafts, and even in the geometric patterns of traditional Berber textiles. It's possible that elements of the ancient writing system survived in fragmentary form, preserved in cultural traditions, even after their original meanings were forgotten. The study of ancient Tifinagh scripts also raises broader questions about the development of writing systems in Africa. For too long, the story of human literacy has been dominated by developments in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and China. The discovery of sophisticated writing traditions in prehistoric North Africa suggests that the invention and refinement of written communication may have been more widespread and more ancient than previously recognized. As researchers continue to discover and analyze new Tifinagh inscriptions, each find adds new pieces to the puzzle of Saharan civilizations. Some texts may ultimately prove to be relatively recent, created by historical Berber communities whose achievements have been underestimated. Others may indeed preserve voices from the deep past, offering glimpses of sophisticated societies that flourished in the green Sahara before vanishing with the advancing desert. Standing before these ancient inscriptions, trying to decode messages left by peoples whose names are lost to history, we confront one of archaeology's most poignant challenges. These carved symbols represent human thoughts, experiences, and knowledge preserved across millennia. They are attempts at immortality, messages in bottles cast into the ocean of time. Yet without the key to their meaning, they remain tantalizingly silent, holding their secrets as closely as the desert holds its sand. Meanwhile, other researchers were exploring an even more speculative possibility that one of history's most famous legends might have its roots in Saharan reality. From space, it appears as a perfect bullseye branded into the earth as surface concentric circles of rock formations, stretching nearly 30 miles across the Mauritanian desert. The rigid structure, known to geologists as a spectacular example of natural erosion, has captured imaginations for decades as the most visible circular formation on our planet. But to a growing number of researchers and enthusiasts, it represents something far more intriguing: the possible physical reality behind Plato's legendary Atlantis. The connection seems absurd at first glance. Plato described Atlantis as an island civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed by the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. The Richat structure lies deep in the Sahara, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean, in one of the most arid places on Earth. Yet when we strip away assumptions and examine the evidence with fresh eyes, the parallels become eerily compelling. Plato's description of Atlantis centered on its distinctive geography, a circular city arranged in concentric rings of land and water, with a central island connected to the outer rings by bridges and canals. The dimensions he provided, roughly 23 kilometers across for the entire complex, match the Richat structure with startling precision. The geological formations at Richat show exactly the pattern of alternating rings described in the ancient text: harder rock layers forming elevated land rings, softer formations creating the channels where water would have flowed. But Plato wrote of an island, and the Richat structure clearly lies on dry land. This objection loses force when we consider what we now know about Saharan climate history. 10,000 years ago, when the region was green and wet, the area around Richat would have been lush with rivers and lakes. Some researchers suggest that the structure itself might have been partially flooded, with water flowing through the natural channels between the rock rings, creating exactly the landscape of alternating land and water that Plato described. The geological evidence for ancient water activity at Richat is substantial. The rock formations show clear signs of extensive water erosion. Sedimentary deposits throughout the structure contain marine fossils and salt deposits, indicating that the area was once covered by or connected to large bodies of water. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed what appear to be ancient riverbeds and water channels throughout the site, suggesting a complex hydrological system that could have supported a substantial population. More provocatively, some researchers claim to have identified artificial modifications to the natural structure that could represent human engineering. High-resolution satellite imagery seems to show geometric patterns within the rings that are too regular to be entirely natural. Certain formations appear to have been quarried or shaped, creating flat areas that could have served as foundations for buildings or public spaces. Most intriguingly, there are apparent breaks in the natural ring formations that could represent the gaps or harbors that Plato described as allowing ships to enter the ringed city. The dating question presents both the greatest challenge and the most tantalizing possibility for the Atlantis-Richat connection. Plato claimed that Atlantis was destroyed 9,000 years before his time, roughly 11,600 years ago by our calendar. This date coincides remarkably with the end of the last ice age and the beginning of the Holocene epoch, a period of dramatic climate change that saw sea levels rise dramatically and weather patterns shift across the globe. It also falls within the period when the Sahara was transitioning from its wet phase to its current arid state. Could the destruction by flood that Plato described actually refer to the massive climate changes that transformed North Africa at the end of the Pleistocene? As sea levels rose and weather patterns shifted, the wet Sahara began its transformation to desert. Rivers dried up, lakes evaporated, and any civilization that had developed around the young water resources of the Richat structure would have faced catastrophic environmental change. From the perspective of survivors, such changes might well have seemed like divine punishment, a land swallowed by catastrophe in a cosmically brief period of time. The mainstream geological community remains skeptical of artificial modifications to the Richat structure. The formation is well understood as a natural phenomenon, an uplifted dome eroded by wind and water over millions of years to create its distinctive concentric pattern. The artificial features that Atlantis enthusiasts identify can be explained by natural geological processes, differential erosion, mineral deposition, and the normal effects of weathering on different rock types. Yet the precision of the correlation between Plato's description and the rigid structure's actual features continues to intrigue researchers. The size, shape, and internal organization all match with uncanny accuracy. Even more remarkably, the geographic location fits Plato's description when we consider ancient knowledge of African geography. To Greek scholars of Plato's time, the African interior was largely unknown. A circular city in what is now Mauritania could easily have been described as being beyond the Pillars of Hercules and might have been thought to be on an island if it was surrounded by the lakes and rivers that once existed in the Green Sahara. The cultural evidence adds another layer of intrigue. The peoples of ancient North Africa, including the ancestors of modern Berbers, maintained oral traditions that speak of great cities and advanced civilizations that existed before the desert came. Some of these stories describe circular cities with sophisticated water management systems, powerful rulers, and sudden destruction when the climate changed. While oral traditions can preserve historical memories across millennia, they can also embellish and mythologize real events beyond recognition. Archaeological investigation of the Richet structure has been limited by its remote location and the political instability of the region. The few expeditions that have conducted systematic surveys have found evidence of human occupation stone tools, pottery fragments, and the remains of ancient camps, but nothing that clearly indicates large-scale urban development. However, most of the structure remains unexplored, and any substantial ruins would likely be buried beneath thousands of years of sand accumulation. Some researchers have proposed that the Atlantis story might represent a conflation of multiple sources. Actual knowledge of circular structures in North Africa, combined with Egyptian accounts of prehistoric civilizations, and possibly even folk memories of the dramatic climate changes that ended the last ice age. Plato himself claimed to have received the story through a chain of transmission that included Egyptian priests, who might have preserved genuine historical memories of Green Sahara civilizations. The Atlantis Richet theory has attracted support from some unexpected quarters. Geologists who study the structure have noted that its formation required very specific geological conditions and timing circumstances that might have made it an attractive location for ancient settlement. The elevated position would have provided strategic advantages. The natural ring structure would have facilitated defense and water management, and the central location in North Africa would have made it ideal for trade networks spanning the continent. Remote sensing technology continues to reveal new details about the Richet structure that fuel speculation about its possible artificial modification. LiDAR surveys have detected subtle geometric patterns beneath the surface that could represent buried structures. Magnetic anomaly studies have identified subsurface features that don't match the expected geological patterns. Most provocatively, some researchers claim that thermal imaging reveals warm spots within the structure that could indicate hollow spaces or different materials, potentially artificial constructions beneath the sand. Whether or not the Richet structure has any connection to Plato's Atlantis, it serves as a powerful symbol of how dramatically landscapes can change over time and how much we still don't know about our planet's past. The transformation of the Sahara from a green, water-rich environment to the world's largest desert represents one of the most dramatic climate changes in recent geological history. If such dramatic transformations can occur, what other evidence of past civilizations might be hidden beneath familiar landscapes? The debate over Atlantis and the Richet structure also reflects broader tensions in archaeology between conventional methodology and speculative theorizing. While mainstream archaeology emphasizes careful excavation, rigorous dating, and conservative interpretation of evidence, alternative researchers argue that orthodox approaches may be missing profound truths about human prehistory. The Sahara, with its vast expanses and limited archaeological exploration, provides fertile ground for both careful science and wild speculation. As climate change continues to reshape our modern world, the story of the Sahara's transformation becomes increasingly relevant. The green Sahara's collapse into desert demonstrates that even the most stable-seeming environments can change rapidly when critical thresholds are crossed. For any civilizations that might have developed during the wet phase, the onset of aridity would have presented challenges similar to those facing modern societies confronting climate change: adaptation, migration, or collapse. Yet even as these grand theories capture imaginations, the historical record shows that sophisticated civilizations did indeed flourish in the Sahara societies that we know existed because they left behind concrete evidence of their achievements. Long before the caravans of medieval merchants traced paths across the Sahara, ancient kingdoms had already mastered the art of desert survival and long-distance trade. The Garamantes, whose capital of Garama lay in what is now the Fezzan Basin of Libya, created an empire that stretched across thousands of square miles of seemingly impossible terrain. For over 1,000 years, from roughly 500 BCE to 700 CE, they transformed one of the most challenging environments on Earth into the backbone of a sophisticated civilization. The Garamantian achievement seems almost miraculous when viewed against the harsh reality of their environment. The Fezzan Basin, even during their period of dominance, was arid and forbidding. Summer temperatures regularly exceeded 50 degrees Celsius. Water was scarce and precious. Yet in this unforgiving landscape, the Garamantes built cities, developed agriculture, maintained armies, and created trade networks that connected sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean world. Their secret lay in one of the most remarkable engineering achievements of the ancient world: a system of underground irrigation channels known as Fogara. These subterranean aqueducts, some extending for dozens of miles, tapped into fossil water aquifers deep beneath the desert floor. The construction required sophisticated knowledge of hydrology, geology, and engineering, and represented a massive investment of labor and resources that could only be sustained by a highly organized society. Archaeological excavations at Garama and other Garamantian sites reveal a civilization of surprising sophistication. The capital city covered several square kilometers and supported a population that may have reached 20,000 at its peak. Substantial stone and mud brick buildings housed workshops, administrative centers, and residential districts. Elaborate burial complexes, some containing thousands of graves, suggest complex social hierarchies and well-developed religious traditions. But it was trade that made Garamantian civilization possible. Their strategic location in the central Sahara positioned them perfectly to control commerce between the Mediterranean world and sub-Saharan Africa. Gold, ivory, exotic animals, and slaves flowed north through Garamantian territory, while manufactured goods, salt, and horses moved south. The Garamantes didn't just facilitate this trade. They controlled it, taxing caravans, providing security, and maintaining the infrastructure that made long-distance desert commerce possible. The wealth generated by this trade is evident in Garamantian material culture. Archaeological sites have yielded Roman glassware, Mediterranean pottery, and luxury goods from across the known world. At the same time, distinctly African artifacts, including sophisticated ironwork, elaborate jewelry, and artistic traditions with clear connections to sub-Saharan cultures, demonstrate that the Garamantes were not mere intermediaries, but active participants in a complex web of cultural exchange. Perhaps most remarkably, the Garamantes developed their own writing system, creating texts in a script that shows influences from both Mediterranean and African traditions. While much of their literature has been lost, surviving inscriptions suggest a rich intellectual culture that included historical records, legal codes, and possibly scientific treatises. Some texts appear to preserve knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that rivals contemporary achievements in better-known civilizations. The Garamantian military was equally impressive. They maintained cavalry forces mounted on horses imported from North Africa, giving them mobility and striking power that few enemies could match. Their warriors were renowned throughout the ancient world. Roman historians describe Garamantian raids that penetrated deep into Roman territory, and Roman armies that attempted to conquer Garamantian lands often found themselves outmaneuvered and defeated in the harsh desert environment. But the Garamantes were not the only sophisticated civilization to flourish in the ancient Sahara. Archaeological evidence reveals numerous other kingdoms and city-states that adapted different strategies for surviving and thriving in desert conditions. Some developed around oases, creating intensive agricultural systems that supported dense populations. Others became nomadic powers, controlling vast territories through superior mobility and military organization. The Kingdom of Kush, centered along the Nile but extending deep into the Sahara, developed sophisticated metallurgy and created some of the most impressive monuments in ancient Africa. Their rulers, known as the Black Pharaohs, briefly conquered Egypt itself, demonstrating the military and organizational capabilities that Saharan civilizations could achieve. Kushite influence extended far into the desert, with trading posts and settlements scattered across what is now Sudan and Chad. Further west, the ancestors of modern Berber peoples created their own networks of desert kingdoms. These societies, known collectively as the Libyan peoples to Mediterranean riders, developed sophisticated techniques for desert survival and long-distance trade. They bred specialized livestock adapted to arid conditions, created portable technologies for processing food and water, and maintained cultural and economic connections across vast distances. The technical achievements of these Saharan civilizations were remarkable. Beyond the famous Foggara irrigation systems, they developed techniques for desert agriculture that maximized scarce water resources. They created specialized tools and weapons adapted to desert conditions. They bred animals, horses, camels, and cattle that could survive in extremely arid environments. Most impressively, they maintained networks of communication and trade that spanned thousands of miles of difficult terrain. The social organization required for these achievements was equally sophisticated. Managing Foggara systems required coordinated labor forces and technical specialists. Maintaining trade networks demanded diplomatic relations, legal frameworks, and security arrangements that spanned multiple kingdoms. Supporting urban populations in desert environments required complex systems for resource allocation, social coordination, and conflict resolution. Yet perhaps most important was their role as cultural bridges between different regions of Africa and the Mediterranean world. The Saharan kingdoms were not isolated desert societies, but cosmopolitan centers where ideas, technologies, and artistic traditions from across the known world came together and influenced each other. They were laboratories of cultural innovation, places where new solutions to human challenges were developed and refined. The decline of these kingdoms came gradually as changing trade routes, political instability, and environmental degradation undermined their economic foundations. The rise of Islam and the Arab conquests of North Africa brought new political arrangements that eventually displaced the traditional Saharan powers. Climate change, including periods of increased aridity, may have made their agricultural systems unsustainable. The introduction of new technologies, particularly improved camel breeding and navigation techniques, may have reduced their control over trade routes. But their legacy endured in multiple ways. The techniques they developed for desert survival and agriculture influenced later civilizations throughout North Africa. Their trade networks provided foundations for medieval Saharan commerce. Their cultural achievements in art, literature, and technology influenced developments across Africa and beyond. Most importantly, they demonstrated that sophisticated civilizations could flourish in environments that seemed impossibly hostile, given sufficient knowledge, organization, and determination. The story of the Garamantes and other Saharan kingdoms provides crucial context for understanding earlier possibilities. If historically documented peoples could create such impressive civilizations in the harsh conditions of the classical period, what might have been achieved during the more favorable conditions of the Green Sahara? The technical knowledge, social organization, and cultural sophistication displayed by these later kingdoms suggests that their prehistoric predecessors might have achieved even greater things when blessed with abundant water and favorable climates. As these historical civilizations flourished and declined, modern technology was beginning to reveal hidden networks that connected their achievements to an even more ancient past. The satellite image appears on Dr. Farouk Hassan's computer screen like a revelation written in shades of tan and gold. To the untrained eye, it shows nothing but endless Saharan sand dunes, their curves softened by millennia of wind sculpture. But Hassan's experienced gaze immediately picks out the subtle variations in texture and tone that reveal one of the desert's greatest secrets. Beneath those dunes flow the ghostly courses of rivers that died thousands of years ago. Using synthetic aperture radar technology that can penetrate sand to depths of several meters, Hassan and his team have mapped an intricate network of Paleocanal's ancient riverbeds that once carried water across much of North Africa. These buried waterways paint a picture of the Sahara, so different from today's reality that it seems like a map of an alien world, where now only scattered oases interrupt the monotony of sand. Vast river systems once created ribbons of life connecting distant regions of the continent. The scale of these hidden river networks is breathtaking. The largest Paleocanal system, traceable across more than 1,000 miles of what is now desert, once carried more water than the modern Nile. Its main course was joined by dozens of tributaries, creating a dendritic pattern of water flow that would have supported ecosystems comparable to the Amazon basin. Along its banks, satellite imagery reveals the faint signatures of what appear to be ancient settlements, their geometric patterns still visible as subtle variations in surface texture. But it's not just the size of these buried rivers that astounds researchers, it's their sophistication. Many of the Paleocanals show evidence of human modification. Straight sections that cut across natural meanders suggest canal construction. Parallel channels that run alongside natural waterways indicate artificial diversions for irrigation or flood control. Most intriguingly, some channels converge at locations where no natural geographic features would have caused such convergence, suggesting that ancient engineers created artificial confluences to concentrate water resources. The dating of these river systems reveals a complex history of environmental change that challenges simple models of Saharan climate. While the most recent period of river activity corresponds to the well-documented Green Sahara phase ending around 4,000 years ago, deeper analysis reveals much older systems. Some Paleocanals appear to have been active intermittently over hundreds of thousands of years, suggesting that the Sahara has experienced multiple wet and dry cycles, some lasting much longer than previously recognized. Ground truthing expeditions to locations identified through satellite analysis have yielded extraordinary discoveries. Drilling cores from buried channel sediments reveal layers of organic material, ancient plants, pollen, and even preserved wood that document the rich ecosystems these rivers once supported. Some core samples contain artifacts, pottery fragments, stone tools, and worked bone that provide direct evidence of human habitation along the ancient waterways. Perhaps most remarkably, some of these artifacts appear to be much older than conventional chronologies would suggest. Stone tools found in deep Paleocanal sediments show sophisticated knapping techniques typically associated with much later periods of human development. Pottery fragments display decorative patterns and technical sophistication that seems inconsistent with their apparent age. While the dating of these materials remains controversial, they raise intriguing questions about the antiquity and sophistication of human presence in the Sahara. The engineering implications of the Paleocanal evidence are equally provocative. If ancient peoples did modify these river systems through canal construction and water management, it would represent one of the earliest examples of large-scale hydraulic engineering in human history. The scale of some apparent modifications suggests organizational capabilities and technical knowledge that could only have been developed and maintained by complex societies. Modern hydrological modeling based on Paleocanal data has reconstructed the water cycle of the ancient Sahara with unprecedented detail. The buried river networks would have created microclimates that extended the wet season and supported vegetation far from the main channels. Evaporation from the extensive water surfaces would have increased local humidity and precipitation, creating positive feedback loops that sustained the aquatic systems. The result would have been a landscape where water was not just present but abundant, true hydraulic civilization covering much of North Africa. The strategic importance of controlling these ancient river systems cannot be overstated. The Paleocanals connected regions that today are separated by hundreds of miles of impassable desert. They provided transportation routes, sources of fresh water, fertile agricultural land, and abundant fish and game. Any societies that controlled key points along these waterways would have possessed enormous economic and military advantages over their neighbors. Archaeological analysis of sites along Paleocanals reveals evidence of exactly such strategic control. Large settlements are concentrated at channel confluences and natural choke points where traffic could be monitored and controlled. Some sites show evidence of substantial fortifications and defensive planning. Others appear to have been specialized trading posts or administrative centers serving extensive hinterlands along the river networks. The disappearance of these river systems was not uniform or simultaneous. Climate data derived from Paleocanal sediments suggests that different parts of the network dried up at different times, creating a complex pattern of environmental stress and adaptation. Some channels maintained intermittent flow for centuries after others had become completely dry. A few may have continued to carry seasonal water into the historical period, providing lifelines for societies adapting to increasing aridity. The social and cultural impacts of this gradual river death must have been enormous. Communities that had developed around permanent water sources faced impossible choices as their lifelines dwindled. Archaeological evidence suggests various adaptation strategies. Some groups followed the retreating waters, gradually migrating toward remaining aquatic resources. Others developed new technologies for water conservation and desert survival. Still others appear to have concentrated around the last permanent water sources, creating dense populations that may have given rise to the complex societies later documented in historical records. But perhaps most intriguingly, some Paleocanal systems show evidence of artificial reactivation during later periods. Excavations at several sites have revealed what appear to be attempts to restore water flow to dried channels through well digging, canal construction, and other hydraulic interventions. These projects, some dating to periods long after the natural river systems had dried, suggest that knowledge of the ancient water networks persisted for centuries or even millennia after their abandonment. The implications extend beyond archaeology into modern water resource management. The fossil aquifers that once fed the Paleocanal systems still exist beneath the Sahara, though their water levels have dropped dramatically. Some modern development projects have attempted to tap these ancient water reserves, with mixed results. Understanding the Paleocanal systems provides crucial insight into the hydrology of these deep aquifers and their potential for sustainable exploitation. More provocatively, climate scientists studying the Paleocanal evidence have identified patterns that might predict future changes in Saharan hydrology. The cyclical nature of wet and dry periods, the geographic patterns of river activation and abandonment, and the relationships between global climate cycles and regional water availability all provide data for modeling potential future scenarios. Some researchers suggest that ongoing global climate change might eventually restore water flow to parts of the ancient channel systems. The hidden rivers of the Sahara serve as monuments to the impermanence of landscapes we consider fixed and eternal. They remind us that beneath the most barren surfaces may lie evidence of abundance and complexity that challenges our assumptions about the past. Most importantly, they provide a framework for understanding how sophisticated civilizations might have developed in the Green Sahara and what evidence of their achievements might still lie buried beneath the sand. As researchers continue to map and explore these buried waterways, each discovery adds new pieces to the puzzle of Saharan prehistory. The rivers that once connected distant regions of Africa may also have connected human societies in ways we are only beginning to understand, creating networks of communication, trade, and cultural exchange that spanned continents and millennia. Meanwhile, scattered along these same ancient river routes, other enigmatic structures continue to puzzle researchers. Monuments that seem to challenge everything we thought we knew about prehistoric Africa. In the remote air mountains of Niger, where the Sahara meets the sparse grasslands of the Sahel, stand structures that shouldn't exist according to conventional archaeological wisdom. These are not the crude stone piles that might be expected from prehistoric African peoples, but sophisticated stepped pyramids that rival the famous monuments of Egypt and Mesopotamia in their architectural precision and construction quality. Yet they remain virtually unknown to the wider world, hidden in a landscape so forbidding that few researchers have ever studied them systematically. The discovery of the Niger pyramids reads like an adventure novel. In 1976, French archaeologist Henri Lotte was conducting surveys in the Air region when his Tuareg guides mentioned ancient structures in a particularly remote valley. Following goat paths and dried watercourses, the expedition eventually reached a complex of stone buildings that left Lotte speechless. Rising from a landscape that seemed capable of supporting only the most basic human survival, were monuments that displayed sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering. The largest pyramid in the complex stands nearly 40 feet tall and covers a ground area comparable to a city block. Its stepped construction follows precise geometric principles, with each level carefully calculated to create perfect proportions. The stone blocks used in its construction, some weighing several tons, were quarried from sites miles away and transported across difficult terrain using unknown methods. Most remarkably, the entire structure was built without mortar, yet remains stable after thousands of years of weathering in one of the world's harshest environments. But it's the sophistication of the construction techniques that truly astounds researchers. The pyramid's orientation aligns precisely with cardinal directions, suggesting advanced knowledge of astronomy and surveying. The internal passages and chambers follow complex geometric patterns that seem to encode mathematical relationships. Some chambers contain acoustic properties that enhance sound in specific ways, suggesting they were designed for ceremonial or communication purposes. The architectural style of the Niger pyramids shows influences from multiple traditions. Elements reminiscent of Egyptian construction techniques are combined with design features that appear uniquely African. Some researchers have suggested connections to the architectural traditions of ancient Nubia or even Ethiopia. Others argue that the structures represent an entirely independent development, proof that sophisticated monumental architecture evolved separately in different parts of Africa. Carbon dating of organic materials found within the pyramid complex has yielded ages that range from 3,000 to 5,000 years, making these structures contemporary with the Great Pyramids of Egypt. This timing coincides with the final phases of the Green Sahara period, when the region was still capable of supporting the large populations and complex organizations necessary for such massive construction projects. Archaeological excavations around the pyramids have revealed evidence of a substantial settlement that once surrounded the monuments. Pottery fragments, stone tools, and the remains of permanent structures suggest a community that persisted for centuries or possibly millennia. Most intriguingly, the artifact assemblage includes items that appear to have been traded from vast distances. Shells from the Atlantic Ocean, copper from mines hundreds of miles away, and decorative objects that show artistic influences from across Africa. The purpose of the Niger pyramids remains enigmatic. Unlike Egyptian pyramids, which clearly served as royal tombs, the Niger structures show little evidence of burial activity. Instead, they appear to have functioned as ceremonial centers, astronomical observatories, or possibly administrative headquarters for regional chieftains. Some chambers contain what appear to be altars or ritual installations, suggesting religious functions. Others show evidence of storage activities, implying economic or administrative roles. Perhaps most mysteriously, the pyramid builders seem to have possessed advanced knowledge of the local environment that allowed them to thrive in conditions that would challenge modern settlements. The complex is positioned to take advantage of seasonal water sources, wind patterns that provide natural cooling, and geological features that offer protection from sandstorms. Underground chambers may have served as cool storage areas or refuges during extreme weather events. The artistic elements incorporated into the pyramid construction add another layer of mystery. Some stone blocks bear carved symbols and geometric patterns that seem to represent a coherent decorative program. While no definitive writing system has been identified, some carvings appear to be more than merely decorative. They may preserve information about construction techniques, astronomical observations, or cultural practices. Local oral traditions among the Tuareg peoples speak of the pyramids as monuments built by ancient kings who ruled the region when it was green and fertile. These stories describe sophisticated societies that possessed knowledge of engineering, astronomy, and metallurgy far advanced beyond what archaeologists have typically attributed to prehistoric African peoples. While oral traditions must be interpreted carefully, the correlation between these stories and the physical evidence is striking. The isolation of the Niger pyramids has both preserved and limited their study. The remote location has protected them from looting and vandalism that has damaged many other archaeological sites, but it has also made systematic research extremely difficult. The political instability that has affected the region in recent decades has further restricted access, leaving many questions about the structures unanswered. Modern remote sensing technology has begun to reveal additional secrets about the pyramid complex. Satellite imagery suggests that the visible monuments may be only part of a much larger network of structures scattered across the region. Ground-penetrating radar has detected what appear to be buried buildings and possibly additional pyramids covered by centuries of sand accumulation. LiDAR surveys have identified geometric patterns in the landscape that may represent ancient roads, field systems, or other infrastructure associated with the pyramid builders. The implications of the Niger pyramids extend far beyond archaeology into broader questions about African history and achievements. For too long, the narrative of human civilization has been dominated by developments in Europe, Asia, and the Middle East, with Africa portrayed as a passive recipient of outside influences. The existence of sophisticated monumental architecture in prehistoric Niger suggests that complex societies and advanced technical knowledge developed independently across the African continent. The timing of the Niger pyramids' construction also provides crucial insight into the capacities of green Sahara societies. If relatively small populations in an already challenging environment could organize the labor and expertise necessary to build such monuments, what might have been achieved by larger societies during the peak of Saharan fertility. The pyramids may represent the final achievements of civilizations that were already in decline, preserving in stone the accumulated knowledge of societies facing environmental collapse. Comparative analysis of the Niger pyramids with other African monuments reveals architectural traditions that may span continents and millennia. Similar construction techniques, decorative elements, and astronomical alignments appear in structures from Ethiopia to Zimbabwe, suggesting either extensive cultural contact or shared technological knowledge across vast distances and time periods. The preservation challenges facing the Niger pyramids are immense. Climate change is intensifying the already harsh environmental conditions, accelerating erosion and structural degradation. Political instability makes protection and maintenance difficult. Perhaps most tragically, lack of awareness means that these remarkable monuments receive no international protection or support, leaving them vulnerable to destruction or abandonment. As researchers continue to study the Niger pyramids and search for similar structures throughout the Sahara, each discovery adds new dimensions to our understanding of prehistoric African achievements. These monuments stand as testaments to the sophisticated societies that once flourished in regions now considered too harsh for complex civilization, reminding us that human ingenuity and organizational capacity can triumph over even the most challenging environments. The stars that guided the pyramid builders still shine over the Air Mountains, their ancient light connecting modern observers with the astronomical knowledge that shaped these remarkable structures. Above the Sahara, the night sky burns with a clarity unknown to most modern humans. Free from light pollution and atmospheric haze, the celestial sphere reveals itself in all its ancient glory, a vast dome studded with thousands of stars, arranged in patterns that have guided human imagination for millennia. Here, where the dry air creates perfect viewing conditions and the horizon stretches unbroken in every direction, ancient peoples developed some of the most sophisticated astronomical knowledge in human history. The relationship between Saharan peoples and the cosmos was not merely observational, but deeply spiritual and practical. Stars served as calendars, marking the seasonal rhythms that governed everything from animal migrations to plant growth cycles. Constellations became navigation aids for travelers crossing vast expanses where few landmarks existed. Most importantly, the movements of celestial bodies provided a framework for understanding time, space, and humanity's place in the cosmic order. Archaeological evidence from across the Sahara reveals the depth and sophistication of ancient astronomical knowledge. Stone circles like Nabta Playa demonstrate precise tracking of stellar movements and solar cycles. Rock art sites frequently show celestial scenes, star patterns, solar and lunar eclipses, and astronomical events that could only have been recorded by careful observers. Even more remarkably, some sites seem to preserve mathematical calculations related to complex astronomical phenomena like the precession of the equinoxes. The precession cycle, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes star patterns to shift over roughly 26,000 years, was apparently known to Saharan astronomers thousands of years before it was discovered by Greek scholars. Computer analysis of megalithic alignments at Nabta Playa suggests that the monument's builders not only understood precession, but incorporated it into their architectural planning, creating alignments that would have remained accurate for millennia, despite the gradual shift in stellar positions. This level of astronomical sophistication required more than casual stargazing. It demanded systematic observation over many generations, careful record-keeping, and mathematical analysis of complex patterns. The social organization necessary to maintain such long-term scientific projects suggests cultures with stable institutions, specialized knowledge keepers, and the ability to pass technical information accurately across generations. The practical applications of this astronomical knowledge were enormous. In a landscape where seasonal changes could mean the difference between abundance and starvation, the ability to predict weather patterns, animal migrations, and plant growth cycles provided crucial survival advantages. Saharan peoples developed sophisticated calendars that tracked multiple astronomical cycles simultaneously, creating systems for timekeeping more accurate than those used by many agricultural civilizations. Navigation across the featureless expanses of the desert required equally sophisticated celestial knowledge. Ancient travelers developed techniques for using star positions to determine direction, latitude, and even approximate longitude. Some researchers suggest that Saharan navigation methods were so advanced that they enabled regular travel across thousands of miles of desert, connecting distant regions of Africa and possibly even facilitating transoceanic voyages. The spiritual dimensions of Saharan astronomy were equally complex. Many ancient cultures saw the sky as a map of divine activity, with stellar movements reflecting the actions and relationships of gods and goddesses. Saharan rock art includes numerous depictions of celestial deities, astronomical events interpreted as divine communications, and ritual scenes that seem to be timed to coincide with specific stellar alignments. Some of the most intriguing astronomical rock art appears to preserve observations of rare or extraordinary celestial events. Paintings that seem to show supernova, comet appearances, and unusual planetary alignments provide direct evidence that ancient astronomers were not just tracking regular cycles, but recording unusual phenomena for posterity. These astronomical news reports, carved in stone, may preserve records of cosmic events that occurred thousands of years ago. The mythological systems developed by Saharan peoples to explain astronomical phenomena show remarkable sophistication and consistency across vast distances and time periods. Stories about the origins of constellations, the relationships between different celestial bodies, and the cosmic significance of astronomical events appear in similar forms throughout North Africa, suggesting either extensive cultural communication or shared origins in very ancient traditions. Comparative analysis of Saharan astronomical traditions with those of other ancient civilizations reveals both unique innovations and shared knowledge. Some Saharan star maps show constellation patterns that don't appear in other traditions, suggesting independent observation and interpretation of celestial phenomena. Others show remarkable similarities to astronomical systems developed in distant regions, raising questions about how such knowledge was transmitted across continents and cultures. The integration of astronomical knowledge with architectural design represents one of the highest achievements of Saharan civilization. Monuments across the region show precise celestial alignments that required not only advanced astronomical knowledge, but sophisticated engineering and construction techniques. Some structures seem designed to function as three-dimensional star maps, with different architectural elements corresponding to specific celestial features. Perhaps most remarkably, some Saharan astronomical sites appear to have been designed as teaching tools, three-dimensional textbooks for transmitting complex knowledge to future generations. The careful arrangement of stones, the precise orientations of structures, and the integration of multiple astronomical phenomena into single monuments suggest that these were not just observatories, but educational institutions, where astronomical knowledge was preserved and transmitted. The decline of Saharan astronomical traditions coincided with the Great Drying that transformed the region from green savanna to desert. As populations were forced to migrate and societies collapsed, the institutional frameworks necessary to maintain complex scientific traditions were disrupted. Much of the accumulated astronomical knowledge was lost, though fragments may have survived in the traditions of successor cultures in the Nile Valley and beyond. Modern archaeoastronomy, the scientific study of ancient astronomical knowledge, has begun to reconstruct the sophistication of Saharan celestial science. Using computer modeling to recreate ancient skies, researchers can verify the astronomical alignments of monuments and test hypotheses about ancient observations. This work has revealed levels of astronomical achievement that rival and sometimes surpass those of better-known civilizations. The implications extend beyond archaeology into modern astronomy and space science. Ancient astronomical records preserved in Saharan rock art and monuments may contain observations of stellar phenomena that occurred before modern scientific observations began. These records could provide valuable data for understanding long-term stellar evolution, the history of our galaxy, and even the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. The study of Saharan astronomy also challenges assumptions about the development of scientific knowledge. the sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics demonstrated by ancient Saharan peoples suggests that scientific thinking may have emerged much earlier and in more places than traditionally recognized. The mathematical concepts, observational techniques, and theoretical frameworks developed by desert astronomers represent genuine scientific achievements that contributed to humanity's growing understanding of the cosmos. Climate change and environmental degradation threaten many Saharan astronomical sites, just as they threaten other archaeological resources in the region. Rising temperatures, increased erosion, and political instability all pose risks to monuments that have preserved astronomical knowledge for thousands of years. The race to document and study these sites before they are damaged or destroyed has become increasingly urgent. Yet the night sky that inspired ancient Saharan astronomers remains largely unchanged. The same stars that guided prehistoric observers still shine over the desert, offering modern researchers the opportunity to verify ancient observations and perhaps rediscover knowledge that has been lost for millennia. In this sense, the Sahara remains a living laboratory for understanding the relationship between human consciousness and the cosmos, relationship that may be as old as humanity itself. As these ancient stargazers tracked the movements of celestial bodies, they witnessed events that would reshape their world in ways they could hardly imagine. The evidence lies embedded in ice cores drilled from Greenland glaciers, in sediment samples taken from deep ocean floors, and in tree rings from ancient forests half a world away. All tell the same story. Approximately 12,800 years ago, Earth's climate system underwent a dramatic and sudden change that plunged the planet back into near glacial conditions for more than 1,000 years. This event, known as the Younger Dryas, represents one of the most rapid and severe climate changes in recent geological history, and it may hold the key to understanding what happened to any advanced civilizations that might have existed during the preceding warm period. The name Younger Dryas comes from a small Arctic flower, Dryas octopetala, whose pollen appears suddenly in sediment layers from this period across Europe and North America, indicating a rapid return to cold, dry conditions. But the implications of this climate event extend far beyond botany. The speed and severity of the change suggest that Earth's climate system crossed a critical threshold, triggering feedback mechanisms that transformed global weather patterns within decades or even years. For the Sahara, the Younger Dryas represented a catastrophic interruption of the wet conditions that had been developing as the world emerged from the last ice age. Instead of the gradual warming and increased precipitation that had been transforming North Africa into a green savanna, the region was suddenly plunged back into hyper-arid conditions. Lakes dried up, rivers stopped flowing, and any complex societies that had been developing during the preceding millennia would have faced an environmental catastrophe of unprecedented proportions. The cause of the Younger Dryas remains one of the most debated topics in climate science, but one of the most compelling theories involves extraterrestrial impact. A growing body of evidence suggests that a comet or asteroid fragment struck Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering a chain of events that led to the climate catastrophe. The impact hypothesis is supported by the discovery of microscopic diamonds, shocked quartz, and other materials that typically form only under extreme pressure and temperature conditions. If confirmed, the impact theory has profound implications for understanding human history during this period. Any civilizations that had developed during the warm, wet conditions of the early Holocene would have faced not just gradual climate change, but sudden, catastrophic environmental collapse. The combination of impact effects, massive fires, atmospheric darkening, and climate disruption would have challenged even the most sophisticated and well-prepared societies. The Saharan evidence for Younger Dryas impacts is particularly intriguing. The Libyan desert glass, a form of natural glass found scattered across western Egypt, may have been formed by the intense heat of a cosmic impact during this period. Some researchers have suggested that the circular structures and unusual geological formations found throughout the route. Sahara could represent impact craters from this same event, or related impacts from a fragmented comet. But the Younger Dryas was not the only climate catastrophe that may have affected Saharan civilizations. The transition from the Green Sahara to modern desert conditions involved multiple episodes of rapid change, some occurring over periods as short as decades. These climate flips, sudden reorganizations of atmospheric and oceanic circulation patterns, would have been devastating for any societies dependent on predictable water resources. Paleoclimatic records from Saharan lake sediments reveal a pattern of abrupt transitions that reads like a catalog of environmental disasters. Around 8,200 years ago, a sudden cooling event caused by the collapse of North American ice sheets triggered global climate changes that affected rainfall patterns across North Africa. Around 5,900 years ago, another rapid change marked the beginning of the final transition to full desert conditions across much of the Sahara. The social and cultural impacts of these rapid climate changes would have been enormous. Archaeological evidence from various sites shows sudden abandonment of settlements, dramatic changes in material culture, and evidence of population movements that coincide with periods of rapid environmental change. Some sites show evidence of attempts to adapt to changing conditions, the construction of elaborate water storage facilities, changes in agricultural practices, and modifications to settlement patterns, but many simply end abruptly, their occupants apparently forced to abandon everything and flee. The speed of some climate transitions may have been fast enough to overwhelm even sophisticated adaptation strategies. Computer models of Saharan climate change suggest that in some cases, the transition from wet to dry conditions occurred over periods of just a few decades. For societies built around permanent water sources, such rapid changes would have allowed little time for orderly migration or technological adaptation. Yet some evidence suggests that certain groups may have prepared for or anticipated these changes. Some megalithic sites in the Sahara appear to have been designed with knowledge of long-term astronomical cycles that correlate with climate patterns. If ancient peoples understood the connections between celestial mechanics and climate change, they might have been able to predict and prepare for major environmental transitions. The concept of cyclic climate change was apparently known to some ancient civilizations. Egyptian texts refer to recurring periods of abundance and scarcity that follow predictable patterns. Mesopotamian records describe similar cycles, often attributed to divine intervention, but possibly reflecting accurate observation of long-term climate patterns. If Saharan peoples possessed similar knowledge, they might have understood that the Green Sahara period was temporary and planned accordingly. Some researchers have suggested that the myth of a golden age, followed by catastrophic decline, theme that appears in cultures around the world, might preserve folk memories of actual climate-driven civilizational collapse. The similarity of these stories across different cultures and continents suggests either shared experiences of environmental catastrophe or transmission of historical memories across vast distances and time periods. The technological and social innovations required to survive rapid climate change would have been enormous. Societies facing environmental collapse would have needed to develop new water conservation techniques, modify their agricultural practices, reorganize their social structures, and possibly relocate entire populations. The knowledge and technologies developed during these crisis periods might have been among the most sophisticated achievements of prehistoric peoples. Modern climate science has begun to recognize that abrupt climate changes are not rare exceptions, but regular features of Earth's climate system. The discovery of numerous rapid transitions in paleoclimatic records has revolutionized understanding of climate stability and predictability. For contemporary societies facing the prospect of rapid climate change, the experiences of ancient peoples dealing with similar challenges provide both cautionary tales and potentially valuable insights. The study of ancient climate catastrophes also provides perspective on the resilience and adaptability of human societies. Despite facing environmental changes that were far more severe and rapid than those anticipated from modern climate change, human populations not only survived, but in many cases went on to create new and more sophisticated civilizations. The collapse of green Sahara societies may have contributed to the rise of Egyptian and Mesopotamian civilizations by forcing innovations in technology, social organization, and resource management. Archaeological evidence suggests that climate refugees from the Sahara carried with them not just survival skills, but accumulated knowledge and cultural achievements that enriched the societies that received them. The technologies, artistic traditions, and social innovations developed during the Green Sahara period may have provided crucial foundations for later civilizations, ensuring that the achievements of these ancient peoples were not lost, but transformed and transmitted to new contexts. The legacy of climate catastrophe in the Sahara extends beyond archaeology into modern environmental policy and climate adaptation strategies. The rapid pace of ancient climate changes demonstrates that environmental transitions can occur much faster than gradual models suggest. The successful adaptation strategies developed by ancient peoples' technologies for water conservation, techniques for desert survival, and social systems for managing scarce resources may provide valuable insights for modern societies facing similar challenges. As researchers continue to study the complex relationships between climate change and human civilization in the ancient Sahara, each discovery adds new dimensions to our understanding of both environmental history and human adaptability. The story of how sophisticated societies coped with rapid climate change thousands of years ago may be one of the most relevant historical lessons for our modern world, providing both warnings about the potential impacts of environmental change and inspiration about the human capacity for resilience and innovation. Yet among all the peoples who faced these environmental challenges, one group left behind particularly tantalizing evidence of continuity and adaptation. Deep beneath the ruins of Garama, the ancient capital of the Garamantian kingdom, archaeologists have uncovered something that challenges conventional understanding of how civilizations develop and disappear. In chambers sealed for over 1,000 years, they found not just the expected artifacts of a desert trading society, but evidence of knowledge systems and cultural traditions that seem to stretch back far beyond the historical period. Connections to the prehistoric Sahara that suggest the Garamantis may have been inheritors of a much older legacy. The conventional story of the Garamantis begins around 500 BCE, when they first appear in historical records as a powerful kingdom controlling trade routes across the central Sahara. Classical historians describe them as formidable warriors and skilled desert survivors who built cities in regions that seemed impossible to inhabit. But new archaeological evidence suggests that this beginning may have been merely the moment when the Garamantis entered the awareness of Mediterranean civilizations, not the origin of their own cultural development. Excavations at Garamantian sites have revealed layers of occupation that extend far deeper into the past than previously recognized. Beneath the well-documented remains of the historical kingdom lie older settlements that seem to represent continuous habitation stretching back thousands of years. The ceramic traditions, architectural techniques, and artistic styles show clear evolution from earlier periods, suggesting that the classical Garamantis were the culmination of cultural development that began during the Green Sahara period. Perhaps most significantly, the Garamantis possessed technical knowledge that seems disproportionate to their supposed historical origins. Their famous Fogra irrigation systems, underground channels that tapped fossil water aquifers, required sophisticated understanding of hydrology, geology, and engineering that typically develops over centuries of experimentation and refinement. The complexity and efficiency of these systems suggest that the technology was inherited from earlier cultures rather than developed from scratch by desert nomads. The astronomical knowledge embedded in Garamantian monuments and city planning provides even more compelling evidence of ancient connections. The orientation of major buildings at Garama corresponds to stellar alignments that would have been established during much earlier periods. Some structures seem designed to track astronomical phenomena that were no longer visible from the site during the historical period, suggesting that they were built according to knowledge preserved from times when the Saharan climate was different. Garamantian art and religious practices show clear connections to the rock art traditions of the prehistoric Sahara. Ceremonial objects found in royal burials include imagery and symbols that appear in rock paintings dating to the Green Sahara period. Religious practices involving cattle, water symbolism, and astronomical observations echo themes that appear throughout prehistoric Saharan art, suggesting that the Garamantes maintained cultural continuity with much earlier populations. The social organization of Garamantian society also reflects patterns that may have been established during earlier periods. The complex hierarchies, specialized craft production, and long-distance trade networks that characterized the kingdom required institutional knowledge and social structures that typically develop over many generations. The sophistication of Garamantian administration and law suggests that they inherited well-developed systems of governance rather than creating them from scratch. Genetic studies of human remains from Garamantian sites reveal population continuity that extends back to the Green Sahara period. The biological ancestry of the Garamantes shows clear connections to populations that lived in the region during wetter climatic periods, suggesting that their kingdom may have been built by direct descendants of prehistoric Saharan peoples rather than by immigrant populations who arrived during historical times. The linguistic evidence is equally intriguing. The Garamantian language, known primarily through personal names and place names recorded by classical authors, shows connections to language families that appear to be very ancient in North Africa. Some linguistic elements suggest relationships to languages spoken across the prehistoric Sahara, implying that the Garamantes may have preserved linguistic traditions that originated during the Green Sahara period. Archaeological evidence from Garamantian sites includes artifacts that seem to preserve much older technological traditions. Stoneworking techniques, metallurgical practices, and ceramic technologies show continuities with material cultures from prehistoric sites across the Sahara. Some tools and weapons found in Garamantian contexts appear to be made using techniques that were already ancient by the time of the historical kingdom, suggesting that the Garamantes maintained craft traditions inherited from much earlier periods. The decline and disappearance of the Garamantian kingdom around 700 CE has traditionally been attributed to changing trade patterns, Arab invasions, and environmental degradation. But new evidence suggests that the end of the kingdom may have been more complex, involving the breakdown of cultural systems that had been maintained for thousands of years. The collapse may have represented not just the end of a medieval African kingdom, but the final extinction of cultural traditions that stretched back to the prehistoric Sahara. Yet the legacy of the Garamantes did not disappear completely. Modern Tuareg peoples of the Central Sahara maintain oral traditions, cultural practices, and technical knowledge that show clear connections to Garamantian civilization. Some researchers suggest that the Tuareg may be direct cultural descendants of the Garamantes, preserving in their nomadic lifestyle and oral traditions elements of knowledge systems that originated in the Green Sahara. The implications of Garamantian cultural continuity extend far beyond the history of a single kingdom. If the Garamantes did represent an unbroken chain of cultural development stretching back to the Green Sahara, they may have preserved knowledge and achievements from prehistoric civilizations that were otherwise lost. Their technical innovations, social institutions, and cultural practices might reflect adaptations and refinements of much older systems. The study of Garamantian connections to prehistoric Saharan cultures also provides insights into how civilizations adapt to long-term environmental change. Rather than simply collapsing when the climate shifted, some Green Sahara societies may have successfully adapted their technologies, social structures, and cultural practices to survive in increasingly arid conditions. The Garamantes may represent the ultimate expression of this adaptive success, a civilization that maintained sophisticated urban society in one of the world's harshest environments. Modern climate change research has begun to recognize the Garamantian adaptation strategies as potentially valuable models for contemporary societies facing environmental challenges. Their techniques for water management, desert agriculture, and social organization in resource-scarce environments provide insights that may be relevant to modern adaptation efforts. The institutional knowledge that allowed Garamantian civilization to persist for over 1,000 years in the Central Sahara may contain lessons for building resilient societies in an era of environmental uncertainty. The archaeological investigation of Garamantian sites continues to yield new discoveries that illuminate their connections to the prehistoric Sahara. Each excavation season reveals new evidence of cultural continuity, technological inheritance, and social complexity that suggests the kingdom was far more than a simple desert trading state. The Garamantes may have been the guardians of humanity's oldest civilizational traditions, preserving in their desert kingdom the accumulated wisdom of the Green Sahara. As researchers continue to explore the deepest layers of Garamantian sites and analyze the cultural connections revealed by new discoveries, the story of this remarkable kingdom becomes increasingly complex and significant. The whispers of the Garamantes may be echoes of much older voices, the final expressions of civilizations that flourished when the Sahara was green, and humanity was first learning to build complex societies in harmony with challenging environments. But beyond the historical achievements of documented kingdoms, other voices from the distant past continued to speak through the oral traditions that survived the desert's transformation. Around flickering fires and desert camps, where the Sahara wind carries stories older than written history, Tuareg elders still speak of Azalif, the great city that once stood where now only dunes roll endlessly under starlight. Their voices carry the weight of generations, weaving together fragments of memory that have survived the rise and fall of empires, the coming and going of rains, and the slow transformation of their world from garden to desert. The story, passed down through countless tellings, speaks of a time when the desert bloomed with cities whose walls caught the light of dawn like jewels scattered across green plains. Azilef was the greatest of these, a circular city built around springs that never failed, where kings gathered tribute from lands that stretched beyond the horizon. The people of Azalef knew the secrets of calling rain, of making the earth fertile, and of reading the future in the movements of stars. Their knowledge was so great that travelers came from distant lands to learn from their wise men and women. But pride grew with prosperity, and the people of Azalef began to believe they were masters of the desert rather than its partners. They demanded more from the land than it could give, and they forgot the ceremonies that kept the world in balance. The spirits of wind and water grew angry, and the great punishment began. First came the failing rains, then the dying of springs, and finally the sand itself rose up to swallow the city and scatter its people to distant lands. This is just one version of stories told throughout the Sahara, variations of which appear in the oral traditions of peoples separated by hundreds of miles and speaking different languages. The Berbers of Morocco speak of Lixus, a golden city that vanished beneath the waves of sand. The peoples of Chad remember Sao, an empire of giants whose cities were swallowed by the earth when they angered the sky god. From Mali to Sudan, from Algeria to Niger, similar tales persist, memories of lost greatness, of cities that once flourished where now only desert remains. Academic scholars have long dismissed these stories as folklore, mythical explanations for the harsh realities of desert life, or romantic embellishments of more modest historical events. But as archaeological evidence accumulates for sophisticated prehistoric civilizations in the Sahara, some researchers are beginning to wonder whether these oral traditions might preserve genuine historical memories, transmitted across thousands of years through the collective memory of desert peoples. The consistency of themes across different cultures and languages is striking. Almost universally, the stories describe circular cities, abundant water, advanced knowledge of astronomy and agriculture, and sudden destruction due to environmental catastrophe or divine judgment. The geographic specificity is also remarkable. Many stories identify particular locations, mountain ranges, or natural features that correspond to actual places where archaeological evidence of prehistoric occupation has been found. The time depth implied by these oral traditions challenges conventional understanding of how long historical memories can survive without written records. Most anthropological studies suggest that oral traditions rarely preserve accurate information for more than a few centuries. Yet some of the Saharan stories seem to describe events and conditions that could only have existed during the Green Sahara period, thousands of years before the earliest historical records of the peoples who preserved them. The mechanisms by which such ancient memories might have been preserved are fascinating to consider. Desert peoples developed sophisticated techniques for memorizing and transmitting information across generations. Songs, stories, and ceremonial recitations serve not just as entertainment, but as repositories of practical knowledge about water sources, navigation routes, seasonal patterns, and survival techniques. If technical information could be preserved in this way, it's possible that historical information was transmitted through similar channels. Some of the most intriguing oral traditions concern the relationships between different Saharan cities and kingdoms. Stories describe networks of communication and trade that connected distant regions, diplomatic relationships between rulers separated by vast distances, and cultural exchanges that spread knowledge and technology across the continent. These descriptions match patterns that archaeologists are beginning to detect in the distribution of artifacts and architectural styles across the ancient Sahara. The astronomical knowledge embedded in many oral traditions is particularly compelling. Stories describe the use of stars for navigation, timekeeping based on celestial cycles, and the construction of monuments aligned with cosmic phenomena. The level of astronomical detail preserved in some traditions suggests that the storytellers had access to sophisticated observational knowledge, possibly inherited from cultures that developed advanced understanding of celestial mechanics. Religious and spiritual traditions preserved in Saharan oral culture also show connections to practices that may have originated during the Green Sahara period. Ceremonies involving water, cattle, and astronomical observations appear throughout the region, often in contexts that suggest they are adaptations of older practices to changed environmental conditions. Sun rituals seem designed to invoke rain or ensure the fertility of scarce resources, possibly representing cultural memories of times when such ceremonies were routine rather than desperate appeals. The linguistic evidence for ancient connections is equally intriguing. Many Saharan languages contain specialized vocabularies for activities, technologies, and environmental conditions that no longer exist in their current territories. Technical terms for advanced agricultural techniques, sophisticated water management systems, and navigation methods suggest that these languages developed in contexts very different from their current environments. Comparative analysis of oral traditions from different parts of Africa reveals patterns that may reflect ancient cultural connections. Stories with similar themes, characters, and plot structures appear in regions now separated by thousands of miles of desert, suggesting either common origins in prehistoric cultural networks or preservation of shared traditions that once connected distant peoples. Some researchers have attempted to use oral traditions as guides for archaeological investigation, following story locations to search for physical evidence of the cities and civilizations described in the tales. While this approach remains controversial, several discoveries have been made at sites identified through oral tradition, including ancient settlements, rock art sites, and megalithic monuments that were unknown to formal archaeology. The challenge of interpreting oral traditions lies in separating potential historical content from the mythological and symbolic elements that inevitably accumulate over long periods of transmission. Stories change with each telling, adapting to new circumstances and incorporating contemporary concerns. The line between history and myth becomes increasingly blurred as traditions age and pass through different cultural contexts. Yet even if the oral traditions of the Sahara preserve only fragmentary and highly transformed memories of actual events, they provide valuable insights into how desert peoples understood their past and their relationship to their environment. The consistent emphasis on environmental change, the loss of abundance, and the need to maintain harmony with natural forces suggests that these cultures develop sophisticated understanding of their place in long-term ecological cycles. Modern efforts to record and preserve Saharan oral traditions have taken on new urgency as traditional ways of life are disrupted by modernization, urbanization, and political conflict. Many of the elderly knowledge keepers, who preserve the oldest and most complete versions of traditional stories, are passing away, taking with them irreplaceable cultural information. Digital recording projects and collaborative research efforts between academics and traditional communities are working to preserve these traditions before they are lost forever. The study of oral traditions also provides insights into the resilience and adaptability of human cultures facing environmental challenges. The ability of Saharan peoples to maintain coherent cultural narratives across thousands of years of dramatic environmental change demonstrates the power of collective memory and storytelling as mechanisms for cultural survival. The knowledge preserved in these traditions about survival techniques, social organization, and environmental adaptation may be more valuable than ever as modern societies face the challenges of climate change. As researchers continue to investigate the connections between Saharan oral traditions and archaeological evidence, new techniques are being developed for analyzing the historical content of folklore and mythology. Computer modeling of cultural transmission, linguistic analysis of traditional texts, and comparative studies of global oral traditions are beginning to provide more sophisticated tools for extracting historical information from mythological sources. The whispers preserved in Saharan oral traditions may indeed be echoes of ancient voices, speaking across millennia about civilizations that flourished when the desert was young and green. Whether these voices carry literal historical truth or symbolic cultural wisdom, they remind us that human memory is deeper and more persistent than we often recognize, and that the stories we tell about our past may preserve truths that formal history has forgotten. Meanwhile, scattered across the landscape that gave birth to these enduring stories, other mysteries lay waiting in forms that seem to mock the very notion of earthly origin. The piece of glass catches the morning light like a captured star, its pale green surface rippling with an inner fire that seems almost alive. Dr. Elena Vasquez holds it carefully, knowing that the object in her hands is older than human civilization and more mysterious than any artifact ever crafted by ancient peoples. This is Libyan desert glass, a natural material so pure, so perfectly formed, that ancient Egyptians carved it into jewelry fit for pharaohs, yet so enigmatic that modern science still debates its origins. Scattered across 6,500 square kilometers of the Great Sand Sea, between Libya and Egypt, lie millions of pieces of this extraordinary glass. The specimens range from tiny fragments no larger than pebbles to massive chunks weighing dozens of kilograms. All share the same otherworldly beauty, a translucent yellow-green color, a purity that exceeds 98% silica, and a formation process that remains one of geology's most puzzling mysteries. The discovery of Libyan desert glass in archaeological contexts adds layers of intrigue to its geological enigma. The most famous example adorns the burial breastplate of Tutankhamun, where a scarab carved from the mysterious glass occupies the center of one of ancient Egypt's most precious artifacts. The craftsmanship required to work this material harder than most metals available to ancient artisans suggests that Egyptian jewelers considered it precious enough to justify extraordinary effort and skill. But the Egyptians were not the first to value this desert glass. Archaeological surveys of the strewn field, the area where the glass fragments are found, revealed tools and weapons made from the material dating back thousands of years. Paleolithic peoples apparently recognized that desert glass could be knapped into tools, with edges sharper than obsidian and more durable than flint. Some implements show sophisticated workmanship that suggests specialized knowledge of the material's unique properties. The origin of Libyan desert glass has puzzled scientists since its modern rediscovery in the 1930s. The most widely accepted theory involves a meteorite impact, or airburst that occurred approximately 29 million years ago. The intense heat generated by such an event, temperatures exceeding 1,700 degrees Celsius, could have instantaneously melted surface sand into the pure silica glass found throughout the region. The lack of a visible crater has led some researchers to propose that the impacting object exploded in the atmosphere, distributing its energy over a wide area without creating a single large crater. However, alternative theories continue to challenge the impact hypothesis. Some researchers argue that the glass could have been formed by lightning strikes of unprecedented scale and duration. Others propose volcanic activity or even natural nuclear reactions occurring in uranium-rich deposits. Each theory faces significant challenges in explaining the scale, purity, and distribution patterns of the glass deposits. Recent analysis using advanced spectroscopic techniques has revealed chemical signatures in the glass that may provide clues to its formation. Trace elements and isotope ratios suggest formation temperatures and cooling rates that are difficult to reconcile with any single formation mechanism. Some specimens contain microscopic inclusions that appear to be fragments of extraterrestrial material, supporting the impact theory. Others show evidence of multiple heating and cooling cycles that suggest a more complex formation process. The geographic distribution of desert glass provides additional puzzles. While most fragments are concentrated in specific areas, isolated specimens have been found hundreds of kilometers from the main strewn field. Some pieces show evidence of transportation by wind or water, but others appear to be in their original positions, suggesting that the formation event affected a much larger area than the current distribution suggests. The relationship between desert glass and ancient human populations raises intriguing questions about prehistoric responses to extraordinary natural phenomena. If the glass formation was recent enough to be witnessed by human populations, and some researchers argue for much younger ages than the commonly accepted, 29 million years, it would have been an event of unimaginable scale and terror. The memory of such a catastrophic event might have influenced religious beliefs, mythological traditions, and cultural practices for thousands of years. Some Saharan oral traditions do indeed preserve stories of fire from the sky, of landscapes transformed by celestial violence, and of glass scattered by angry gods. While these stories are typically interpreted as metaphorical or mythological, the existence of vast deposits of impact glass in the same regions suggests that they might preserve folk memories of actual geological events. The correlation between story locations and glass deposits is striking enough to warrant serious consideration. The use of desert glass in ancient technologies also suggests more sophisticated understanding of materials science than typically attributed to prehistoric peoples. Working with this material requires knowledge of its unique properties, its extreme hardness, its tendency to fracture in predictable patterns, and its ability to hold incredibly sharp edges. The fact that ancient peoples not only used desert glass, but transported it over long distances implies that they recognized its exceptional qualities and valued them highly enough to justify significant effort in procurement and transport. Modern technological applications of natural glass have provided insights into why ancient peoples might have prized this material. Libyan desert glass has properties that make it superior to manufactured glass for certain applications. Its purity and formation process create internal stresses that allow it to fracture in ways that produce edges sharper than surgical steel. Its chemical composition makes it highly resistant to weathering and chemical attack. These properties would have made it extraordinarily valuable to peoples dependent on stone tool technologies. The study of desert glass has also contributed to our understanding of impact processes and their effects on planetary surfaces. The Libyan desert glass strewn field provides one of the best preserved examples of impact glass formation on Earth, offering insights into similar processes on other planets and moons. The material has been used as an analog for impact glasses found in lunar samples, helping scientists understand the history of bombardment in the inner solar system. Conservation efforts for desert glass deposits face significant challenges from both natural and human factors. Wind erosion continues to redistribute fragments, potentially destroying the spatial relationships that provide clues to formation processes. Illegal collection for commercial purposes has removed thousands of specimens from their original contexts, eliminating scientific information about their distribution patterns. Climate change and increasing desertification threaten to bury or expose deposits in ways that could compromise future research. The cultural significance of desert glass extends beyond its geological and archaeological importance. For many Saharan peoples, the material holds spiritual significance as a gift from the sky gods or a remnant of cosmic battles. Traditional beliefs about the glass as protective or magical properties have influenced its use in ceremonial objects and personal ornaments for thousands of years. These cultural traditions provide additional layers of meaning and value that complement its scientific importance. Recent discoveries of similar impact glasses in other parts of the world have provided comparative contexts for understanding the Libyan material. Impact glasses from the Sahara show both similarities and differences with specimens from other strewn fields, revealing information about the variability of impact processes and their dependence on local geological conditions. These comparisons have also highlighted the exceptional purity and preservation of the Saharan glass deposits. As research continues into the origins and significance of desert glass, new analytical techniques are revealing previously unknown details about its formation and history. Electron microscopy has identified microscopic structures that preserve information about formation temperatures and cooling rates. Isotopic analysis has provided insights into the source materials and formation environment. Computer modeling of impact processes has tested various formation scenarios against the observed characteristics of the glass deposits. The mystery of Libyan desert glass serves as a reminder that our planet, as history, includes events of almost unimaginable scale and violence. Whether formed by cosmic impact, atmospheric explosion, or some other extraordinary process, the glass represents a moment when normal geological processes were overwhelmed by forces powerful enough to melt sand into jewels. The fact that ancient peoples recognized the exceptional nature of this material and incorporated it into their most precious artifacts suggests that they too understood they were dealing with something beyond the ordinary fragments of cosmic violence transformed into objects of earthly beauty. Standing in the desert where these mysterious fragments lie scattered like fallen stars, it is impossible not to wonder what other evidence of extraordinary events might be hidden beneath the Sahara's shifting sands, and what new technologies might reveal about the secrets still waiting to be discovered. The helicopter hovers 20 meters above the dunes, its rotors whipping sand into glittering clouds that dance and dissipate in the afternoon heat. Suspended beneath the aircraft, a sophisticated array of sensors begins its methodical survey of what appears to be empty desert. But Dr. James Chun, monitoring the data stream on his laptop, knows that appearance is deceptive. The ground-penetrating radar, magnetometers, and LiDAR systems are revealing structures buried beneath the sand geometric patterns too regular to be natural, too complex to be simple. This is the new archaeology of the Sahara, where satellites orbiting hundreds of miles above Earth can detect the shadows of ancient walls, where radar can map buried cities with greater precision than traditional excavation, and where algorithms can identify potential archaeological sites in minutes rather than decades. As technology advances at exponential rates, the vast expanses of the Sahara, long considered too remote and dangerous for systematic exploration, are finally yielding their secrets to electronic eyes that can see through sand as if it were water. The revolution began with satellite imagery, which allowed researchers to survey vast areas without the enormous costs and risks of ground expeditions. Early satellite archaeology relied primarily on visible light images, which could detect surface features like ancient roads, field boundaries, and the subtle color variations that often mark buried structures. But even these basic techniques revealed far more human activity in the Sahara than anyone had imagined. Synthetic aperture radar, SAR, transformed the field by providing the ability to see beneath surface layers. SAR systems bounce radio waves off the ground and measure the return signals, which vary depending on the density and composition of subsurface materials. Buried walls, roads, and buildings show up as distinct patterns because they reflect radar differently than surrounding soil and sand. The technique can penetrate several meters of dry sand, revealing archaeological features that would otherwise require extensive excavation to discover. The results have been revolutionary. SAR surveys have identified thousands of potential archaeological sites across the Sahara, from small settlements to massive complexes that cover several square kilometers. Some of these sites show geometric regularities that suggest sophisticated urban planning, with streets, building blocks, and public spaces arranged in organized patterns. Others reveal evidence of large-scale engineering projects, canals, fortifications, and possibly even harbors for ancient lakes that no longer exist. Ground-penetrating radar, GPR, provides even more detailed subsurface mapping capabilities. GPR systems emit radio pulses into the ground and measure the time it takes for reflected signals to return, creating detailed three-dimensional maps of buried structures. The technology can resolve individual walls, rooms, and architectural features with remarkable precision, allowing archaeologists to excavate sites virtually before deciding where to dig. One of the most exciting GPR discoveries came from the Saharan site of Jerma, the ancient Garamantian capital. Surveys revealed a vast underground complex beneath the known ruins chambers, tunnels and structures that extend far beyond the visible remains. Some of these subsurface features appear to be natural cave systems that were modified and expanded by ancient engineers. Others seem to be entirely artificial constructions, possibly serving as storage facilities, workshops, or refuges during extreme weather events. LiDAR, light detection, and ranging technology adds another dimension to Saharan archaeology by creating incredibly detailed topographic maps that can reveal subtle surface features invisible to conventional observation. LiDAR systems use laser pulses to measure distances with centimeter precision, generating digital elevation models that show microtopography, tiny variations in ground level that often mark buried structures. Even features buried under meters of sand can create surface expressions detectable by LiDAR, especially when combined with computer algorithms designed to identify archaeological signatures. Magnetometry provides complementary information by detecting variations in the Earth's magnetic field caused by buried materials. Ancient hearths, metalworking areas, and fired ceramics create magnetic anomalies that can persist for thousands of years. Large concentrations of these anomalies often indicate substantial human occupation, while their spatial patterns can reveal information about site organization and activity areas. Some Saharan sites show magnetic signatures suggesting intensive metallurgical activities, including possible evidence of iron smelting and advanced metalworking techniques. The integration of multiple remote sensing technologies has revealed patterns that no single technique could detect. Sites that show only subtle indications in satellite imagery often reveal complex internal organization when examined with GPR. Magnetic anomalies can guide targeted SAR surveys to the most promising areas of large sites. LiDAR can detect the remnants of ancient field systems and road networks that connect scattered settlements into larger regional systems. Perhaps most remarkably, artificial intelligence and machine learning algorithms are now being applied to archaeological remote sensing data. Computer programs trained to recognize the signatures of known archaeological sites can rapidly scan satellite imagery and identify potential new locations for investigation. These algorithms can process in hours what would take human analysts months to examine, dramatically accelerating the pace of discovery while reducing the costs of exploration. The results of this technological revolution have exceeded the most optimistic predictions. Surveys that once would have required decades of fieldwork can now be completed in months. Sites that might have remained undiscovered for centuries are being identified and mapped with unprecedented detail. The overall picture emerging from these surveys suggests that the ancient Sahara supported far more extensive human occupation than previously recognized, with settlements, trade networks, and infrastructure spanning thousands of square kilometers. Some of the most intriguing discoveries involve apparent urban complexes of remarkable size and sophistication. High-resolution satellite imagery has identified what appear to be planned cities with regular street grids, defensive walls, and monumental architecture. Ground-penetrating radar surveys of these sites have revealed internal organization consistent with complex urban societies' specialized districts, water management systems, and public buildings that suggest advanced social organization. The temporal relationships between different sites are also becoming clearer as remote sensing reveals the connections between them. Ancient road networks, detected through satellite imagery and confirmed by ground surveys, show how distant settlements were linked into regional systems. The alignment and construction techniques of these roads suggest centralized planning and maintenance, implying political or economic integration across vast territories. Water management systems revealed by remote sensing provide particularly compelling evidence for sophisticated ancient societies. Buried canal networks, detected through GPR and satellite imagery, show complex engineering projects that managed water resources across entire watersheds. Some of these systems appear to have been designed to capture and distribute seasonal floodwaters, while others tapped into groundwater aquifers through techniques similar to the famous qanats of ancient Persia. The preservation of these buried features varies dramatically across the Sahara, depending on local geological and climatic conditions. In areas with stable sand cover, archaeological features can be preserved with remarkable fidelity, maintaining their original forms after thousands of years of burial. In regions subject to wind erosion or periodic flooding, the same features may be badly degraded or completely destroyed. Understanding these preservation patterns is crucial for prioritizing survey efforts and interpreting remote sensing results. Modern remote sensing also reveals the dynamic relationship between ancient human settlements and environmental change. Sites that appear isolated and marginal in today's landscape often show evidence of having been located along ancient rivers or near former lakes. The distribution patterns of settlements provide information about how human populations adapted to changing environmental conditions, following retreating water sources, or developing new strategies for survival in increasingly arid conditions. The ethical and legal challenges of remote sensing archaeology are becoming increasingly important as the technology becomes more powerful and accessible. High-resolution satellite imagery is now available commercially, raising questions about who has the right to survey and study archaeological sites. The ability to identify and map sites remotely also creates new opportunities for looting and illegal excavation, as detailed site information becomes widely available. International cooperation in Saharan remote sensing faces challenges from political instability, territorial disputes, and varying national policies regarding archaeological research. Some countries have embraced collaborative international surveys, while others restrict access or limit data sharing. The vast scale of the Sahara and the resources required for comprehensive surveys necessitate international coordination, but achieving such cooperation remains challenging. The future of Saharan archaeology increasingly depends on continued technological advancement and international collaboration. New satellite systems with enhanced resolution and penetration capabilities are being developed. Artificial intelligence algorithms are becoming more sophisticated at identifying archaeological signatures. Miniaturized sensors and drone technologies are making ground surveys faster and more cost-effective. These developments promise to accelerate the pace of discovery while reducing the costs and risks of Saharan exploration. As this technological revolution continues to unfold, each new survey adds pieces to the puzzle of Saharan prehistory. The invisible cities revealed by electronic sensors are beginning to tell their stories, speaking across millennia through the language of buried stone and the geometry of ancient planning. The desert that once seemed empty is proving to be full of secrets, waiting for the right technologies to make them visible. But perhaps the most significant revelations concern the connections between these newly discovered sites and the better-known civilizations that arose in the Nile Valley. In the pre-dawn darkness of the Giza Plateau, as the first rays of sunlight catch the edge of the Great Pyramid's summit, a profound mystery reveals itself to those who know where to look. The astronomical alignments of these monuments, the mathematical precision of their construction, and the sophisticated knowledge they embody did not emerge from nothing. The genius that built these eternal monuments had roots that stretched deep into the past roots that may trace back to the green valleys of the ancient Sahara, where civilizations learned to read the stars and channel the forces of earth and sky. The connections between ancient Egypt and the prehistoric Sahara are written in stone, preserved in art, and encoded in the very DNA of the populations that built the pharaonic civilization. As climate forced the inhabitants of the Green Sahara to abandon their ancestral lands, they carried with them not just their possessions, but their accumulated knowledge, their cultural traditions, and their understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering that would become the foundation of one of history's greatest civilizations. The evidence begins with the timing. The emergence of complex Egyptian civilization coincides precisely with the final desiccation of the Sahara. As the last reliable rains failed and the final rivers dried up, populations that had thrived in the desert for millennia found themselves forced to migrate toward the one reliable source of water in the region, the Nile River. The archaeological record shows a sudden population increase in the Nile Valley around 4000 BCE, accompanied by rapid technological and cultural development that seems to appear almost overnight. But this wasn't the arrival of simple refugees fleeing environmental disaster. The migrants from the Sahara brought with them sophisticated technologies and knowledge systems that transformed Egyptian civilization. Cattle herding, which became central to Egyptian economy and religion, was a technology perfected in the Saharan grasslands. The astronomical knowledge that enabled precise pyramid alignments was developed under the clear desert skies, where stellar movements could be observed with unparalleled clarity. The mathematical concepts that governed Egyptian architecture and engineering reflected understanding gained through millennia of monumental construction in the prehistoric Sahara. The artistic evidence is equally compelling. The earliest Egyptian art shows clear continuities with Saharan rock art traditions. The same stylistic conventions, the same symbolic systems, and even specific iconographic elements appear in both contexts. The famous Palette of Narmer, one of the earliest examples of Egyptian royal art, includes imagery that directly parallels scenes found in Saharan rock paintings created thousands of years earlier. The continuity is too precise to be coincidental. It represents the preservation of artistic traditions carried from the desert to the river valley. Religious and mythological parallels provide even more striking evidence of Saharan influence on Egyptian civilization. The Egyptian goddess Hathor, often depicted as a cow, clearly derives from Saharan cattle-worshipping traditions. The solar theology that dominated Egyptian religion reflects the astronomical observations and star worship that developed in the desert environment where celestial phenomena were more visible and predictable than anywhere else on Earth. Even specific myths about the creation of the world show parallels with Saharan traditions preserved in oral literature. The technological evidence is perhaps most convincing. The precision of Egyptian pyramid construction required mathematical and engineering knowledge that must have been developed over many generations. The ability to move massive stone blocks, create perfectly level foundations, and achieve astronomical alignments with extraordinary accuracy suggests technological traditions with deep historical roots. The Saharan megaliths, with their sophisticated astronomical alignments and advanced construction techniques, provide the most plausible source for these capabilities. Genetic studies of ancient Egyptian populations strongly support the migration hypothesis. DNA analysis of mummies from various periods shows clear connections to populations from across North Africa, including regions that are now deep desert. The genetic diversity of ancient Egyptians reflects contributions from multiple source populations, consistent with the idea that Egyptian civilization was built by the convergence of migrants from different parts of the Sahara as it dried up. The linguistic evidence adds another layer of support. The Egyptian language contains numerous elements that appear to derive from languages once spoken across the Sahara. Technical vocabularies related to astronomy, mathematics, and engineering show connections to linguistic traditions found throughout prehistoric North Africa. Some Egyptian religious texts preserve what appear to be much older linguistic elements, possibly representing sacred languages inherited from Saharan predecessors. The water management technologies that made Egyptian civilization possible also show Saharan origins. The sophisticated irrigation systems of ancient Egypt required knowledge of hydrology and engineering that was most likely developed in the desert environment where water was scarce and its management was crucial for survival. The Fogra systems of the Garamantes and other Saharan peoples provided models for the canal networks and basin irrigation systems that supported Egyptian agriculture. Urban planning concepts evident in Egyptian cities reflect organizational principles that may have been developed in the Saharan environment. The careful orientation of buildings to astronomical phenomena, the integration of ceremonial and residential areas, and the sophisticated systems for water distribution and waste management all show precedence in Saharan archaeological sites. The ability to coordinate large-scale construction projects and manage complex urban populations required administrative knowledge that was most likely refined over centuries of practice in challenging environments. The mathematical knowledge embedded in Egyptian monuments suggests educational traditions with deep historical roots. The precision of pyramid geometry, the accuracy of astronomical calculations, and the sophistication of engineering solutions all point to institutional knowledge that was preserved and transmitted across generations. The megalithic observatories of the Sahara provide the most likely context for the development of such mathematical sophistication. Some of the most intriguing evidence comes from the earliest Egyptian texts, which contain references to ancestral lands in the West Desert regions that were remembered as the original homes of the Egyptian people. These textual traditions, while often interpreted mythologically, may preserve genuine historical memories of Saharan origins. The Egyptian concept of the Field of Reeds, a paradise located in the west, bears striking resemblances to descriptions of the Green Sahara found in other African oral traditions. The architectural parallels between Egyptian and Saharan monuments are equally striking. The stepped pyramid form that characterizes early Egyptian monument construction appears first in Saharan contexts, where megalithic structures show similar design principles and construction techniques. The integration of astronomical alignments into architectural planning, a hallmark of Egyptian monument construction, was already being practiced by Saharan builders thousands of years earlier. Trade networks that connected Egypt with the rest of Africa follow routes that were established during the Green Sahara period. The paths that carried gold, ivory, and exotic goods from the African interior to Egyptian markets were originally developed by Saharan peoples who maintained contact with distant regions despite the challenging desert environment. Egyptian control over these trade routes represented the inheritance of commercial networks created by their Saharan predecessors. The decline of distinctly Saharan elements in Egyptian culture over time reflects the gradual integration of migrant populations into Nile Valley society. Early Egyptian art and architecture show strong Saharan influences, but these elements become less prominent in later periods as new traditions developed in response to the riverine environment. This pattern is consistent with cultural change in migrant populations, where ancestral traditions gradually give way to adaptations to new environments. Modern DNA studies have begun to trace the specific migration routes that connected the Sahara with the Nile Valley. Genetic markers in modern Egyptian populations show clear connections to groups from specific regions of the ancient Sahara, providing information about which areas contributed most heavily to Egyptian population formation. This research is revealing a complex pattern of migrations that occurred over several millennia as different parts of the Sahara became uninhabitable at different times. The implications of Saharan contributions to Egyptian civilization extend far beyond ancient history. If Egypt, long considered one of humanity's first great civilizations, was actually built on foundations laid in the prehistoric Sahara, it suggests that complex societies may have emerged much earlier and in more places than traditionally recognized. The achievements attributed to Egyptian innovation may actually represent the culmination of much longer developmental processes that began in the Green Sahara. The story of Saharan influence on Egypt also provides insights into how civilizations respond to environmental crisis. Rather than simply collapsing when faced with climate change, sophisticated societies may adapt by migrating to more favorable environments while preserving their essential cultural and technological achievements. The success of Saharan migrants in creating Egyptian civilization demonstrates the resilience and adaptability of human cultures facing environmental challenges. As research continues into the connections between the Sahara and Egypt, new discoveries are constantly adding details to this emerging picture of cultural continuity and migration. Advanced DNA analysis, improved dating techniques, and new archaeological discoveries are providing ever more precise information about how, when, and where Saharan peoples contributed to the formation of Egyptian civilization. Each new piece of evidence strengthens the case that the greatest achievements of ancient Egypt had their origins in the vanished civilizations of the Green Sahara. The echoes of the Sahara that resonate through Egyptian civilization remind us that even the most dramatic environmental changes cannot destroy human knowledge and achievement. They can only transform them, carrying the wisdom of lost worlds into new contexts where they can flourish once again. Yet the influence of the ancient Sahara extended far beyond the Nile Valley, shaping connections that spanned continents and linking distant regions of the world in ways we are only beginning to understand. The desert wind carries more than sand across its endless expanse. It carries whispers of connection, fragments of forgotten highways that once bridged worlds. Modern maps show the Sahara as a barrier 9 million square kilometers of hostile emptiness separating North Africa from the heart of the continent. But this vision of isolation may be humanity's greatest misconception about one of Earth's most mysterious landscapes. Imagine the Sahara not as a wall, but as a bridge, not as an ending, but as a beginning. Archaeological evidence suggests that what we now see as the world's largest hot desert was once something far more extraordinary, a vast network of rivers, lakes, and grasslands that served as the ultimate crossroads of ancient civilizations. The clues emerge slowly from beneath the sand. Ancient trade routes, their stone markers still visible from satellite imagery, crisscross the desert in patterns too organized to be random. These paths connect Mediterranean settlements with sub-Saharan kingdoms, linking the gold fields of West Africa with the spice markets of the Middle East. The Romans knew these routes. The Phoenicians used them. But who built them first? Dr. Heinrich Barth, the 19th century explorer, documented ruins along these trade corridors that seemed impossibly old. Settlements with architectural styles that matched neither Roman nor Islamic traditions. Stone foundations that suggested permanent cities in regions now completely uninhabitable. His journals describe water management systems of stunning sophistication, aqueducts and reservoirs designed to capture and distribute rainfall across vast distances. The ancient Greeks spoke of a land beyond the desert they called Ethiopia, not the modern nation, but a realm of great cities and advanced peoples. Herodotus wrote of trade expeditions that brought back gold, ivory, and stories of kingdoms that rivaled Egypt in their grandeur. These weren't tales of nomadic tribes surviving in harsh conditions. These were descriptions of settled, complex societies. Recent discoveries have revealed something even more intriguing. Genetic studies of modern African populations show patterns of mixing and migration that paint a picture of massive population movements across what is now the Sahara. These genetic highways tell stories of contact and exchange spanning thousands of years, evidence of a time when the desert was not a barrier but a meeting place. The ancient city of Timbuktu, now at the southern edge of the Sahara, was once just one stop along a vast network of urban centers. Archaeological surveys using ground-penetrating radar have identified geometric anomalies beneath the sand patterns that suggest the remains of large settlements scattered across the desert as heart. These ghost cities may have been the forgotten capitals of civilizations that connected 3 continents. Consider the implications. If the Sahara was indeed a crossroads rather than a wasteland, then human civilization may be far older and more interconnected than we've ever imagined. The great achievements we attribute to isolated cultures, the mathematics of ancient Egypt, the metallurgy of Nubia, the astronomy of early West African kingdoms may have emerged from a vast network of knowledge exchange centered in what is now empty desert. The desert remembers these connections in ways both subtle and profound. Wind patterns still follow the ancient river courses. Migratory animals maintain routes their ancestors used when the land was green. And deep beneath the sand, waiting for the right technology to reveal them, may lie the archives of humanity's greatest forgotten chapter, when the Sahara was not a desert at all, but the beating heart of the ancient world. Deep in the heart of Mauritania, where the desert stretches endlessly in every direction, lies one of Earth's most enigmatic features. From space, it appears as a perfect bullseye carved into the landscape, a series of concentric circles so precise they seem almost artificial. Scientists call it the Richet structure. The Berber people have always called it something else entirely, the Eye of the Sahara. The formation spans nearly 50 kilometers across, its rings etched into the ancient bedrock with mathematical precision. Geological surveys tell us it's the result of millions of years of erosion, a collapsed volcanic dome worn down by wind and time. The mainstream explanation is elegant in its simplicity: natural forces creating what appears supernatural. But standing at its center, surrounded by its perfect symmetry, one cannot shake the feeling that this explanation might not be complete. The ancient Greek philosopher Plato wrote of Atlantis as a city of concentric rings, water channels separating circular islands, with a great temple at its heart. The description, written over 2,000 years ago, matches the Richet structure with unsettling accuracy. The outer ring measures exactly the dimensions Plato specified for his lost civilization. The concentric pattern follows his architectural descriptions precisely. Dr. Robert Schoch, the geologist who redated the Sphinx, has studied the Richet structure extensively. His findings suggest something conventional geology struggles to explain. The rock formations show evidence of massive water flow, not the gradual erosion expected from wind and rain, but the catastrophic erosion of sudden, enormous floods. The kind of water damage that might result from the collapse of a massive dam or the breach of ancient seawalls. Local legends speak of the site differently than scientists do. Berber oral traditions describe it as the remains of Atlantis, a great city that vanished beneath the waves when the world was younger. These stories, passed down through countless generations, describe the structure as it might have appeared when the Sahara was green, a magnificent city of canals and gardens, its rings filled with water that reflected the desert stars. Recent archaeological surveys around the Richet structure have uncovered anomalies that challenge the purely geological interpretation. Tool fragments scattered across the site date to periods when the region should have been uninhabitable desert. Pottery shards bearing unknown symbols. Stone foundations that seem to follow the structure's circular patterns. Most intriguingly, traces of metallurgy evidence of advanced metalworking in a location where such technology should never have existed. The magnetic properties of the rocks within the structure create another mystery. Satellite imagery reveals magnetic anomalies that form geometric patterns beneath the surface. These underground formations suggest a level of organization that natural processes rarely produce. The patterns are too regular, too purposeful, too much like the foundation layouts of ancient cities. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed even more puzzling details. Deep beneath the visible rings lie additional structures, chambers and corridors that extend far underground. The radar signatures suggest hollow spaces arranged in patterns that mirror the surface rings. If these are natural caves, they follow rules of formation that geology has yet to explain. If they are artificial, they represent engineering on a scale that would challenge even modern capabilities. The timing of the structure's formation adds another layer to the mystery. Geological dating places its major shaping events at roughly 12,000 years ago, precisely the time period when the Sahara was transitioning from green paradise to barren desert. The same era when Plato claimed Atlantis sank beneath the waves. The correlation might be coincidence, or it might point toward something far more extraordinary. Standing within the eye of the Sahara as the sun sets, casting long shadows across its ancient rings, one experiences something that transcends scientific explanation. The geometry speaks to something deep within human consciousness, a recognition of pattern and purpose that our rational minds struggle to dismiss. Whether created by geological forces or human hands, the Richet structure remains one of the most perfectly mysterious places on Earth. Perhaps the truth lies somewhere between geology and legend. Perhaps what we see today is both natural wonder and archaeological site. The weathered remains of humanity's first great experiment in urban planning, carved into a landscape that was once capable of supporting the dreams of ancient architects. The dunes move like slow-motion waves across the Sahara, shifting and reshaping with each desert wind. To watch them is to witness time itself in motion. Sand grains that once formed the floors of ancient seas now dancing through the air, settling into patterns that will endure for decades before the next wind reshapes them again. This endless dance of sand serves as both destroyer and protector, erasing evidence of the past while simultaneously preserving it beneath protective layers of silicon and time. Archaeologists have learned to read the desert's memory in ways that would seem impossible to outsiders. Each layer of sand tells a story of climate, of seasons, of the great environmental shifts that have shaped the Sahara across millennia. Like pages in a vast geological book, these layers preserve not only the remains of ancient life, but the artifacts of human presence in landscapes now completely hostile to settlement. The preservation power of desert sand rivals that of ice or amber. In the dry, sterile environment beneath the dunes, organic materials can survive for thousands of years unchanged. Wooden tools emerge from excavations looking as if they were carved yesterday. Textile fragments retain their original colors. Even delicate materials like papyrus and parchment can endure, protected by the very environment that seems most destructive. Recent discoveries have revealed just how much the sand remembers. Ground-penetrating radar surveys across the Sahara have identified thousands of archaeological sites buried beneath the dunes. Ancient settlements, roads, and irrigation systems create distinct signatures that modern technology can read through meters of accumulated sand. Each buried site represents a piece of human history that conventional archaeology has never accessed. The most remarkable preservation occurs in what scientists call sand shadow zones, areas where geological features create stable pockets immune to the desert's constant reshaping. Here, entire landscapes from the Sahara's green period remain frozen in time. Fossilized rivers still show their meandering courses. Ancient lake beds preserve the compressions of shorelines and the remains of the communities that once thrived beside them. Dr. David Wright's work with satellite archaeology has revolutionized our understanding of what lies beneath the sand. His thermal imaging studies reveal the ghostly outlines of massive structures, scattered across the desert, geometric patterns too large to be natural formations, too complex to be simple settlements. These buried giants suggest the presence of urban centers rivaling the great cities of ancient Mesopotamia or Egypt. The sand preserves more than just physical artifacts. It holds chemical signatures that tell stories of human activity across vast timescales. Soil samples from beneath the dunes reveal elevated levels of phosphorus, evidence of intensive agriculture in regions now completely barren. Traces of metallurgy appear in areas where no metals should exist. Even the isotopic signatures of ancient organic matter tell tales of complex food webs and managed ecosystems. Perhaps most intriguingly, the sand preserves patterns of human modification to the landscape itself. Ancient field systems, terraced hillsides, and engineered water channels remain visible to sophisticated imaging techniques. These landscape modifications suggest not just temporary occupation, but permanent settlement by peoples who expected their environment to remain stable for generations. The preservation extends to the microscopic level as well. Pollen grains trapped in the sand provide detailed reconstructions of ancient plant communities. These microscopic time capsules reveal that the Sahara's green period supported not just grassland, but complex forest ecosystems with species diversity rivaling modern tropical regions. Such environments could have supported population densities and cultural complexity far beyond what we typically associate with ancient Africa. Yet the sand's memory comes with a cruel irony. The same preservation that protects these archaeological treasures also makes them nearly impossible to access. Excavating beneath the dunes requires enormous resources and presents unique technical challenges. Most of the Sahara's buried history remains beyond our reach, protected by the very forces that preserved it. Wind patterns across the desert follow ancient rhythms, moving sand in cycles that span decades or centuries. Sites buried for generations sometimes emerge naturally, offering brief windows of access before being covered again. Local people have long known these cycles, timing their movements to take advantage of temporarily exposed water sources and archaeological features. The sand remembers everything, every footstep, every settlement, every civilization that has crossed its surface. Beneath the endless dunes lies an archive of human achievement that may rewrite our understanding of ancient history. The challenge lies not in finding this archive, but in learning to read it before the next wind covers it again with the patient, preserving embrace of deep desert sand. As technology advances, our ability to peer beneath the surface improves. Soon, we may be able to map entire buried cities without disturbing a single grain of sand. The long sleep of the desert may finally yield its secrets, revealing a chapter of human civilization that has waited thousands of years to be read again. The implications ripple outward like waves across still water. If the Sahara once harbored complex civilizations, if its green valleys supported cities and kingdoms that rivaled the ancient wonders of the world, then everything we think we know about the cradle of human civilization requires fundamental reconsideration. The narrative of human progress, from Africa to the Middle East to Europe, may be not just incomplete, but backwards. Consider what this possibility means for our understanding of ancient Egypt. The pharaohs built their monuments beside the Nile, but where did their advanced knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering originate? Traditional archaeology suggests these innovations emerged gradually from simpler Neolithic cultures. But what if they inherited their wisdom from sophisticated predecessors whose cities now lie buried beneath Saharan sand? The Great Pyramid's astronomical alignments demonstrate knowledge of celestial mechanics that seems impossibly advanced for its supposed era of construction. Its mathematical proportions encode the value of pi to remarkable precision. The precision of its orientation to cardinal directions exceeds what should have been possible with Bronze Age tools. These achievements make more sense if we imagine them as the culmination of a much longer tradition of scientific development, one that may have begun in the Green Sahara thousands of years earlier. Recent genetic studies of ancient Egyptian mummies reveal surprising diversity in their ancestry. The DNA analysis shows significant genetic contributions from sub-Saharan Africa, far more than previously suspected. This evidence suggests extensive contact and migration between the Nile Valley and regions deep within what is now the Sahara. Such genetic mixing implies not occasional contact, but sustained interaction, the kind that would result from trade networks, political alliances, or even population movements from environmental refugees fleeing the desert's advance. The technology required to survive and thrive in the Sahara during its transition from green paradise to barren wasteland would have demanded innovations that conventional archaeology attributes to much later periods. Advanced water management systems, sophisticated agricultural techniques, and complex social organization would have been necessary to sustain large populations through environmental catastrophe. These same innovations appear in later civilizations around the Mediterranean and in sub-Saharan Africa, often without clear developmental sequences to explain their sudden appearance. Archaeological evidence from sites like Nabda Playa suggests that ancient Saharans possessed astronomical knowledge rivaling that of Stonehenge or the Maya. The stone circles there predate Stonehenge by thousands of years and demonstrate sophisticated understanding of stellar calendars and seasonal cycles. If such knowledge existed in the Sahara 12,000 years ago, what other achievements might have emerged from the same intellectual tradition? The linguistic evidence tells an equally compelling story. Many African languages preserve words and concepts related to advanced technologies, metallurgy, navigation, astronomical calculation, that seem anachronistic for their supposed historical contexts. These linguistic fossils may be remnants of a much more sophisticated past, preserved in oral traditions that maintain technical vocabulary long after the knowledge itself was lost. Trade networks connecting the Mediterranean world with sub-Saharan Africa operated along routes that crossed the heart of what is now the Sahara. Archaeological evidence shows that these networks were far older and more sophisticated than previously believed, suggesting they may have originated when the desert was still habitable. The complexity of these early trade systems implies the existence of urban centers and political organizations capable of managing commerce across continental distances. The artistic traditions of ancient Africa also point toward lost sophistication. Rock art throughout the Sahara depicts technologies and social structures that conventional timelines struggle to explain. Images of wheeled vehicles appear thousands of years before such technology was supposedly invented in the region. Depictions of metallurgy and astronomical observation predate the archaeological evidence for such activities by millennia. If we accept the possibility that the Sahara once supported advanced civilizations, we must reconsider the entire trajectory of human development. Africa may not have been a recipient of civilization from elsewhere, but its original source. The achievements we attribute to ancient Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley may represent not independent innovations, but the scattered remnants of an earlier, greater flowering of human culture that originated in the African heartland. This possibility carries profound implications for understanding cultural diffusion in the ancient world. Rather than civilization spreading from a few isolated centers, it may have radiated outward from a much larger source region that encompassed the entire Sahara during its green period. The similarities between ancient architectural styles, mathematical systems, and astronomical knowledge across Africa, the Mediterranean, and even into Asia may reflect this common origin rather than later contact and borrowing. The environmental catastrophe that transformed the Sahara from garden to wasteland may have been the defining event in early human history. The refugees from this climate disaster may have carried their knowledge and traditions to distant lands, seeding the civilizations we recognize today. In this light, the great achievements of the ancient world appear not as isolated innovations, but as fragments of a shattered whole, pieces of a puzzle whose centerpiece lies buried beneath the sand. The desert never forgets. In the silence between one grain of sand and the next, in the space between heartbeats of geological time, memory persists. The Sahara stretches endless and unchanged beneath the African sun. Yet within its apparent emptiness lies the most profound question humanity has yet to ask. What if our greatest civilization is not ahead of us, but behind us, sleeping beneath the dunes? The wind shifts patterns it has followed for 10,000 years, moving sand from one ancient site to another, covering and revealing in cycles longer than recorded history. Each grain carries within it the story of mountains ground to dust, of seas that dried to nothing, of forests that surrendered their green memory to time itself. But some stories run deeper than geology. Some memories transcend the merely physical world. Standing in the heart of the Sahara as night falls, one experiences something that defies description. The temperature drops with startling speed, and the stars emerge with an intensity that city dwellers have never witnessed. The Milky Way stretches overhead like a river of light, following the same path ancient astronomers charted when the desert was green and full of life. In this cosmic context, the possibility of lost civilizations seems not just plausible but inevitable. The archaeological record speaks in fragments and whispers. A tool here, a foundation stone there, traces of metallurgy where none should exist. But the real evidence may lie not in what archaeologists have found, but in what they have yet to look for. Beneath millions of square kilometers of sand, an entire chapter of human history waits for discovery. The technology to read this buried archive grows more sophisticated each year. Soon, we may have the tools to see through the sand itself, to map entire cities without disturbing the desert's protective embrace. Yet perhaps the most compelling evidence lies not beneath the sand, but within ourselves. Human consciousness carries its own form of memory patterns of thought and behavior that echo across millennia. The universal human fascination with circles and geometric forms, the instinctive recognition of astronomical cycles, the deep psychological connection between water and civilization, these may be more than cultural coincidences. They may be genetic memories of a time when humanity achieved something greater than we have managed since. Consider the myths that persist across cultures, separated by thousands of miles and years. Stories of golden ages, of paradise lost, of great floods that ended earlier worlds. These narratives appear in the oral traditions of peoples who could never have contacted each other, yet their stories share remarkable similarities. Perhaps these are not inventions of human imagination, but collective memories of actual events, remnants of historical truth, preserved in the only format that could survive the collapse of writing systems and cities. The Sahara's greatest secret may be its role as humanity's first laboratory for complex civilization. The challenges of managing resources across vast distances, of organizing societies around scarce water sources, of maintaining cultural continuity through environmental catastrophe. These are precisely the problems that would have driven rapid innovation in social, political, and technological systems. The solutions developed in the ancient Sahara may have provided the foundation for all subsequent human achievements. Modern satellite technology reveals new mysteries with each passing year. Geometric patterns beneath the sand that span hundreds of kilometers. Underground water systems that suggest continental-scale engineering projects. Magnetic anomalies that form regular grids across regions where no cities are supposed to have existed. Each discovery expands the scope of what might be buried beneath the dunes, waiting for the right moment to emerge into the light once again. The cruel irony of the Sahara's preservation is that the same forces that protected its secrets for millennia now guard them from easy discovery. The archive is vast beyond imagination, but it remains largely unread. Future technologies may change this. Ground-penetrating radar grows more sophisticated each year. Satellite imaging reveals details that were invisible just decades ago. Artificial intelligence begins to recognize patterns that human eyes cannot detect. But perhaps the sand's secrets will reveal themselves gradually, in their own time, following cycles older than human ambition. Local people speak of sites that appear and disappear with the shifting dunes, emerging during certain seasons or weather patterns before vanishing again. These natural excavations may be the desert's way of slowly sharing its memories with those patient enough to watch and listen. The possibility that the Sahara once hosted humanity's greatest civilization changes more than just our understanding of the past. It transforms our perspective on the future. If we achieved complexity and sophistication 10,000 years ago, if we built cities and managed resources on a continental scale before the first Egyptian pyramid was conceived, then our current technological achievements may represent not progress, but recovery. The sand remembers everything. Every footstep, every foundation stone, every dream of human builders who imagined their cities would last forever. In its patient silence, the desert holds the answer to who we were, who we are, and who we might become again. The only question is whether we have the wisdom to listen to what the wind whispers when it moves across the endless dunes at dawn. If this journey through the desert's hidden history has stirred something within the deep places of memory, consider following along as we continue to explore the mysteries that lie just beneath the surface of our accepted world. The sand keeps many secrets, and there are more stories waiting in the silence between the dunes.